the third runway at Heathrow. I bet you anything I'm going to be claiming my pension before that third runway is built.
How long does it take to knock a runway up? 4 weeks? You know, there's a fella. Some lads tarmacked a road near me.
Yeah, I was going to say, by the way, if you need your driveway done, Ian Collins Incorporated is available to do that as well.
Yeah, it's called Life's a Bitumen.
You've seen me on Watchdog.
I have once again lost control of the studio. The sick man of Europe, Mr. Peter Cardwell, is going to leave. Thanks for coming. Great to have you back. Ian Collins is up next. I'm done for the day. Thank God. Do keep your calls coming in. It's going to be a rip-roaring show up next with Ian. This is Talk. We are, I think, sometimes the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And yes, good afternoon. Welcome to the home of common sense. Thank you to Julia. Thank you to Peter Cardwell. Welcome to the programme. Lots to get through this afternoon, including, of course, as you've been hearing, Rachel Reeves refusing to rule out further tax rises in spring, confirming government support for Heathrow's third runway to boost Britain's economy. She's also going to build some ponds or reservoirs, apparently. We'll watch with interest. Can Rachel Reeves revive the economy? Is a straight question. What do you take from what she told us a little earlier? Details on the way also this afternoon. Lloyds Bank will close over 130 high street branches by March next year, citing a shift to mobile banking. 'Tis the direction of travel, kids. Get used to it. More on that as well. And public support for the death penalty has risen to 55%, with millennials showing the strongest backing. This is following the sentencing of the Southport killer. More on those stories, lots more from you, all the breaking news and everything you need to know. 0344 499 1000. I think we should set a timer. I think we should set a timer this afternoon, one of those kind of Wizard of Oz type hourglass things. A big old beast of a timer. It's countdown to Ed Miliband's resignation. Surely it has to happen. How could it not? Red Ed, the Archbishop of Bollards, the man who's worshipped at the altar of net zero, must surely walk the plank. By his own reckoning, must surely walk the plank. How can he sit by and idly watch the very thing that he told us will kill the planet and will kill us has just been given a big fat green light by the government in which he serves? Now, if that is not a resignation matter, I don't know what is. Unless, of course, you're a hypocritical duplicitous and you can fill in the blanks. The Heathrow expansion will happen. Ed, along with Cabinet colleagues and Sadiq Khan, are all opposed to it, but it's going to happen. What they'll do, of course, is they'll offset it. It's called carbon offsetting, don't you know? Stupid. Carbon offsetting, which means you can wreck stuff and then plant some trees in Cleethorpes and say, that's fine, look, we planted the trees over there in Cleethorpes. So don't worry, it's all kind of all that guff and stuff that comes out of the planes has all been factored in. I'm happy that there is a big green light given to Heathrow, but it's well at odds with the evangelical approach this government have had to net zero, particularly Ed Miliband, a fella who cannot get out of bed on a daily basis unless he believes there is a crime of environmental iniquity going on. Ed remains where he is, steadfast. He wasn't at the speech today. This morning, of course, it was the Chancellor, Ricochet Rach, who delivered her big raft of announcements. It was all about growth in a wide-ranging speech in Oxfordshire today. She confirmed the government has backed plans for a badly needed third runway at Heathrow, as the case for expansion, she said, is stronger than ever. She, by the way, I said it at the beginning, she's refused to rule out tax rises in the future. Do you ever get the impression this lot don't really know what they're doing? That maybe they're kind of slightly out of their depth? When she did the Q&A afterwards, it was a bit sixth form to me. I'm not suggesting that Rachel Reeves is some kind of fool. I'm sure if you was on your pub quiz on a weekly basis, you'd lose on a weekly basis. Now, she's arguably got some fiscal knowledge in there somewhere. We just don't see it very often, if at all, and we certainly didn't see it today. It was a little student politics-like, you know, and the returning to the cliches and the vacuous platitudes that were wheeled out. Growth is essential. Growth, this is a man alive. Shut it. Get on with it. Give us some real, proper meat that we can get hold of. And of course, the Heathrow expansion, as Julia was saying, is that even likely to happen? And I don't mean this question, by the way, naively. I appreciate that when you make a runway, you don't just lay a couple of inches of tarmac for a mile or two. I know it goes a little deeper than that, quite literally. But how long can it take to build could there be anything? I mean, it's Roman, isn't it, in its implication? It's a very straight road. Ain't no bends in it. It's just a big lump of straight old road. Serious question. If you work in construction, if you've ever laid a runway or worked at an airport and been part of a gang that's laid a runway, seriously, how long can it take? How wide is it? How long is it? Right, it's a mile long. It's, a quarter of a mile, whatever it is. Dig a massive hole, the shape of the road you want to achieve, then fill it in. And then put a nice smooth surface with some lights in the top. Seriously, how long? How long? So this is the idea. Many people, including Julia, saying this will not get built in our lifetime. I'm guessing the opposition from people who want to protect rare newts or something will kick in, and maybe local authorities will have their say. But the principle of it, it's expansion, it's about growth, but apparently unlikely to happen. Is Rachel Reeves going to revive the economy? It is fascinating to see a government whose very existence is predicated on this idea of net zero, go for an announcement that by environmentalists' standards is about the worst thing you can do. This is far worse than your motor car. This is a big... These are aeroplanes. The guff these characters spew out on an hourly basis, it just puts cars into the hors d'oeuvre position of environmental catastrophe. So if that is your thing as an environmentalist, you would be so against you wouldn't even go there. You wouldn't even go there. But what they've realised over there at Labour HQ, first you've got Donald Trump doing some kind of just basic common sense stuff, whether you're left or right. He's employing that. And they've realised that they are also scuppered if they don't look as if they are a party of growth and investment. That's, I think, the long and short. Can Rachel Reeves revive the economy? 0344 499 1000. And whether you like Donald Trump or not, just listen to the kind of speeches that he gives about this kind of stuff. You know, the golden age of America has begun. We're here for business. It's going to grow, baby, grow. We are going to make it happen. It's like we want jobs for Americans. We want to be serious about growth. And you sort of hear it and believe it. When Rachel Reeves says it, I'm not sure I believe it. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Simon Danczuk is a former Labour MP, of course, now commentates on these and other matters. Simon, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Good to be with you.
Nice to have you with us again. It's worth having a little reminder about that big announcement today. The airport expansion is going to come. Apparently, here's what the Chancellor said just a couple of hours ago.
According to the most recent study from Frontier Economics, a third runway could increase potential GDP by 0.43% by 2050. I have always been clear that a third runway at Heathrow would unlock further growth, boost investment, increase exports, and make the UK more open and more connected. So I can confirm today that this government supports a third runway at Heathrow and is inviting proposals to be brought forward by the summer.
So there it is. I mean, talk about a big reverse ferret, Simon, but that's the Chancellor today, at odds with other senior members of her cabinet, of course, in particular Ed Miliband.
Yeah, I think this whole announcement, this speech today, is really a sign of panic on the part of the Labour government. I think they're in a really bad place. They're at a very low rate in the opinion polls. I think businesses aren't happy, UK businesses aren't happy with the performance of the economy or with Rachel Reeves. And she's come out today trying to bolster growth. I mean, the truth is, it's not governments that create growth, it's businesses that create growth. And what we've seen this Labour government do since they got elected is, first of all, they talked the economy down. So they killed confidence in the economy. If you remember, straight after the general election, they were talking the economy down. And then we had that devastating budget from Rachel Reeves, which, amongst other things, increased national insurance. And we've seen week after week jobs being killed because of the increase in national insurance. And so what we are seeing is unemployment's going to go up, businesses having very little confidence in growth. And now we have Rachel Reeves panicking and coming out with a whole variety of announcements, which we all knew about anyway. I mean, they've been planning the Heathrow expansion for quite some time. It's about getting the funding together, getting the development in place. These aren't even decisions that are going to result in action anytime soon.
And the point I was making, in addition to all of that, Simon, which you are absolutely correct on, was that Ed Miliband, now in any other world, Ed Miliband would resign at this point, wouldn't he? He'd say, well, hang on a second, my entire department is based on not having airport expansion, having fewer people flying, not going there. And yet, here he didn't turn up for this speech, by the way, which somebody in his position surely would have done. Wasn't even there for PMQs today either. But no sense that he's going to resign for some curious reason, which takes hypocrisy to a sort of breathtaking, jaw-dropping level. He's obviously going to remain in post because he likes the position and the big red case, and nothing more will be said. It's extraordinary.
It is extraordinary, and it's this sort of hypocrisy that really puts people off politics. Miliband has come out time and again against Heathrow expansion. He's threatened to resign over it previously. He's now in a position where he's in government, and all of a sudden he's prepared to accept it. He can't have it both ways. I mean, some credit to Sadiq Khan. He's written to the Chancellor saying he is still opposed to it. But that's not the case for Ed Miliband. Talk about hypocrisy. I mean, it's the height of it, and people will see through that.
100%. Let's move to we are asking the question, can Rachel Reeves revive the economy? Will it be named Rachel's Runway as well? I mean, a lot of people are suggesting that might be the answer. Where are you coming in? It won't be Terminal 5. Rachel's Runway, yeah, that's where we're landing. Everybody for the rest of time will know it as that. The NHS, run by bureaucrats who are out of ideas, according to MPs. A damning Public Accounts Committee report today warns NHS reforms are being blocked by bureaucracy. Back in October, Health Secretary Wes Streeting acknowledged the dire straits of our health service, but things don't seem to be improving. Let's have a reminder of what Mr. Streeting said.
The NHS is going through what is objectively the worst crisis in its history. And whether it's people struggling to get access to their GP, dialing 999 and an ambulance not arriving in time, turning up to A&E departments, waiting far too long, sometimes on trolleys in corridors, or going through the ordeal of knowing that you're waiting for a diagnosis that could be the difference between life and I'm going to guess the next word was death. But there he is. That's the Health Secretary. We can all outline the problems, but the solutions apparently are getting blocked by bureaucracy, Simon.
Yeah, it's the Public Accounts Committee that's produced the report, and for listeners, this is a select committee in Parliament that objectively looks at whether the taxpayer is getting value for money, and they've come to the conclusion that in terms of the NHS, none of the solutions are forthcoming. We have a major problem with the NHS. There is no doubt about that. I think we spend about 10% of GDP on the National Health Service. Singapore spend about 4% and have a much better service than what we have. And you've got to think whether the solution is just pouring money into it. I just don't buy that. I think Wes Streeting, some credit to him, I think he will be prepared to involve the private sector a little bit more, but it really needs radical overhaul. And I say to listeners on this, we need to radically rethink how it's organised. We've lived with this for far too long. People call it the nearest we've got to a British religion, supporting the NHS. But we can't go on as we are. And we've recently seen Nigel Farage talk about the French model and whether that might work here. I do think, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but we do need a big conversation about what the solution is. No doubt about it.
Indeed. And also, you can sort of imagine, what happens quite a lot in the public sector. I remember this, obviously it's a slightly different animal, but same principle at the BBC, getting people to change their minds over things, particularly when you're dealing with lifers, those that have only ever worked in that sector forever, and you suggest a new idea and, immediately the shutters come down. The groupthink has been challenged. The idea that somehow, there could be another way of doing things. Well, we've always done it like this. Yeah, and that's the problem. You've always done it like that. But getting these, you could suggest you're going to paint the door handles a different colour and there'd be, several thousand meetings before it could happen. It's that almost impenetrable wall of thinking that we seem to be up against with areas such as the NHS.
Absolutely. It's all about culture within the NHS and this defensiveness that things mustn't change. We just must receive more money and do things the same as we've always done. I met with a businessman yesterday. He'd been involved in some private sector cancer centres, and they're stood empty because the NHS won't use the private sector. You've got people waiting for cancer treatment, cancer scans, etc., and yet they won't use the private sector because they're too defensive and believe everything should come through the National Health Service. We've got to have some radical change if we're going to tackle this properly.
Yeah, spot on. Simon, stay with us. Simon Zanchuk is with us, former Labour MP, now a voice of common sense, talking on the big issues of the day. Over to you on this as well, 0344 499 1000. It is a serious question. Can Rachel Reeves revive the economy? She's got an idea for growth. It involves reservoirs and a new runway over there at Heathrow Airport. And there's a lot of other airports saying, well, you could stick a runway here maybe and just sort of spread the love, perhaps. I get that. Apparently, opposition to all of this. Ed Miliband would have been, he's voted against it in the past, of course, spitting feathers at the mere idea that you would ever even countenance the idea of a runway bearing in mind the planet is about to die. I mean, we ain't talking about a few shriveled up cacti. We're talking about everything. Plant life, animal life, human life, almost extinct as a result of our horrendous fume-based endeavours, our environmental acts of sheer criminality over the years. And one of the worst offenders, aeroplanes. Yeah, it's air travel. It's really bad stuff, that air travel thing. It throws out a lot of gunk from the back of those 747s. So we can't have any more of that. And now the government, which he's part of, is giving the green light to exactly that. That would in anybody's book be a resignation, but not for our Ed. He loves a cabinet position. Oh, yes. So he's going to stick around, have a little moan up in the cabinet office, and then go out and sell it to the world and say, actually, no, it's not bad after all, because we're going to plant some trees and offset the carbon footprint. The man is a nutter. 0344 499 1000. But can Rachel Reeves revive the economy? She's actually got quite a lot of good press from right-wing areas, if you want to look at it that way, that have kind of backed her. I'll give you some of that detail in a few moments' time. Your thoughts, if she can do it, 0344 499 1000. What do you think of Rachel's runway? And if you've ever been involved in the construction of building a runway, and I'm being facetious, a genuine question, how long can it actually take to make one of those things? I appreciate there's a lot of stuff involved, multi-layers of kit, in order to withstand the enormity of several thousand tons landing upon it by the second. I get it, but how long? Seriously? You think there's a skyscraper, okay? How long does it take to build a skyscraper? Well, you can do it in a year, maybe, or a big building. A runway, based on that, you'd think, well, maybe, what, I don't know, a couple of months. People go, no, it takes 4 years. 4 years to build a straight road? 0344 499 1000. Our lines are open, 21 minutes after 1. This is Talk.
We knew what the problems were going to be because they arose following the original Dangerous Dogs Act in the first place. You're going to have this backlog of animals that were having to be seized by the police. They had no alternative in various circumstances, and that we're then going to have to follow due process in relation to dealing with those animals. That involves time in veterinary kennels, maybe veterinary treatment or whatever, pending a final decision being made. And anyone that's got a pet dog knows that vets are not cheap.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And Rachel Reeves, revive the economy. Have you got is there a scintilla of faith that you've developed over the last few hours, having seen Ricochet Rach stand there delivering her fiscal plans for the future? Although, interesting, not ruling out more tax rises. Man alive, how much more can a country tax its people? Let's move to this story. Simon Danczuk is with us. Simon's, of course, a former Labour MP who crossed the line into the world of common sense. Always good to have you with us, Simon. Most Britons want to bring back the death penalty. Here's a headline I didn't think we'd be reading out. A new poll by the think tank More in Common reveals growing support. 58% of millennials in favour. This is a sharp rise since autumn 2023 when they last did this. Let's have a listen to the Reform MP Rupert Lowe calling for its return.
I think there's reasons now to have a serious national debate for reintroducing the death penalty in exceptional circumstances, and I think this is an exceptional circumstance.
And a growing support for it, Simon, it seems.
Yeah, that's right. I think there's always been some support for the death penalty within Britain. You know, quite a sizable proportion of the population have always generally supported bringing it back. It's not my view, I have to say. I think it's a greater punishment to keep the perpetrator in prison for any length of time. I realise that costs money, but I think it's a bit of an easy get out to have somebody sentenced to death. But I understand people's concerns. It's undoubtedly on the back of the horrific murders in Southport that people are becoming increasingly emotional about this, and I understand that. But I do think that the death penalty is not for us in Britain. It was once upon a time, but not now. And I think we can punish people better by keeping them incarcerated and making it a very basic existence for them.
Well, if I was going to jail, I'd rather be on the end of a rope than 52 years in prison. I know that much. So you make a point. I guess the argument against that, Simon, is that it's also the taxpayer that has to suffer the bill as well. But the debate will go on. As you rightly say, I don't think it's ever going to come back, but you can see the persuasive arguments why there is an appetite for it to return. And also this, a leaked Home Office report has revealed that civil servants once flagged shows like Yes Prime Minister and The Thick of It as far-right red flags. Fittingly, here's a clip from The Thick of It, which might explain it all. Have a look. There it is. Food by the pound, Simon. I wonder who ever thought that those kind of satirical kind of sitcoms were somehow far-right.
Goodness knows, but The Thick of It is more like a documentary than it is a comedy. That's the truth of it. Having spent considerable number of years in politics, you can often relate to a lot of what goes on in that programme. But this shows where the Home Office is at. This report's been produced within the Home Office, coming up with a whole variety of ideas and suggestions about what's left-wing, what's right-wing, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. What it clearly presents us with is the fact that the Home Office is not fit for purpose. Why would you even employ civil servants that are coming up with these crazy ideas? It's bonkers.
At what point did somebody say, what are you doing this afternoon? Oh, I'm going to watch the entire 6 series of Yes Minister or The Thick of It. Just so I look and check out whether there's any sort of red flags over there. I mean, what a curious way to... But again, it makes you realise when Donald Trump today fired a load of public sector workers because he said you can have this sort of redundancy package. I would imagine it's people like that he had in mind.
Oh, absolutely. I think we have to have a radical overhaul in terms of the civil service. It is not fit for purpose. I mean, the Home Office is probably the worst case, but we need a government that's going to radically overhaul it and introduce some really smarter way of doing government. No doubt about that.
And just a very final one. Lloyds Bank are shutting 136 high street branches by March next year. That's 61 Lloyds, 61 Halifax and 14 Bank of Scotland, part of a cost-cutting exercise and in response to, personal banking and the way people do it on their phones. There's always going to be a contingent of people that will be unhappy about this. They've got over 20 million customers. Many of them won't be happy, but, the sense is... however we romanticise this, Simon, this is the direction of travel. I can't imagine banks will exist in physical form in 10 years' time at all.
No, I think that's probably true. I do all my banking online as many other people do now. And you can use the post office instead of using the bank as well. But it will affect older people. I have neighbours who are elderly and only bank through the high street banks. And so it's for older people that it's probably a greater concern.
Yeah, I think so. Simon, always good to have you on. Thank you, Simon Danchuk, former Labour MP, with us on the programme. In a few moments, we're going to speak to Professor Ashwin Kumar, economist, on that Rachel Reeves speech. What did she get right? What did she get wrong? And is she the person to revive the British economy? And also Paul Beckford, who's the policy director at No Third Runway. They won't be happy with this news, but will it ever happen anyway? All your thoughts on this and the other big stories too. 0344 499 1000. It's 1:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just gone 1:30 on Talk. So Rachel Reeves confirming the government backing for a third runway for Heathrow Airport during a major speech on economic growth. She said the third runway was badly needed. It could create 100,000 jobs beyond Heathrow. She also supported the redevelopment of Manchester United's Old Trafford Stadium and investment at the Oxford-Cambridge Growth Corridor. However, she's refusing to rule out further tax rises in the spring. She's awaiting the OBR's March forecast before finalising tax and spending plans. I can hardly wait. We will speak to somebody in a moment ferociously against the third runway. Paul Beckford is the policy director at the aptly named No Third Runway. Before that, Professor Ashwin Kumar, economist at the Institute for Public Policy Research. Ashwin, good afternoon to you. So let's give a grade then to the Chancellor. How did she do overall in that speech?
Well, it was good to see her being an activist about the economy. What you don't want is a chancellor sitting back and just hoping that growth happens. You want the government to be thinking actively about what it can do to support the economy, to support businesses, to make sure that we've got the infrastructure that we need. So I think in that sense, it was good to see her making a speech on growth, taking steps to support it. However, I do have a sort of slight concern that when we're thinking about the airport in Heathrow, we're thinking about infrastructure investment in only one part of the country.
Yep.
And actually, it's really important that we rebalance economic activity around the country, because that's one of the areas in which the UK does worse than many other countries. It's far too concentrated in London and the southeast, and that actually costs us. And so we do need to see more effort made for infrastructure, for investment spending outside of London and the southeast.
How quick can these things happen? You know, I think I live in probably the wrong... I think I should have been born in China sometimes, because those guys will whip up a runway in about half an hour if you ask them. And I don't know how they do it, and I don't know what they're made of. Paper mache maybe, but they seem to be able to do it. Whereas over here, someone says, yes, it's penciled in for 2056 or something. You think, well, why? I mean, there's obviously going to be environmental objections. There will be planning objections. There'll be all sorts of other parts. The Mayor of London will object, along with, you can see the campaigns happening now. But in theory, you know, growth is like turning around an oil tanker, isn't it?
So this one is a very complex project, and actually the boss of Heathrow Airport has said that they're hoping to have got their planning permission by 2030. So building will only start after that. So I think one of the questions is that when you put all of the money that's going to be spent on this airport against perhaps things that could deliver in more of a short term, you know, bus services, rail improvements in other parts of the country, could that have made more of a contribution to growth in the short term? Yeah. Nevertheless, I do think the government has to take long-term decisions. You can't, just because something won't produce a return for a long time,
True.
You can't just say we're not going to bother to look at it. Otherwise, you know, you get to a few years' time and you haven't taken the decisions you need.
It's interesting that the government have made, you know, in housing and other areas, lots about, you know, crazy planning regulations getting in the way, and yet it's going to take 5 years to get planning permission for a runway, for goodness sake. You know, you have to sort of scratch your head and think, you know, would Trump's America withstand a 5-year powwow while people got together to work out whether they could or couldn't build something?
I mean, some of that time will actually be actually getting detailed plans to put in as a proposal. So it'll be the airport's time to prepare their plans and make them really concrete and precise. But yeah, these things do take a long time. And I think it's one of the questions about you know, we need to see growth in other parts of the country. We need to see it quicker. And there are some schemes that can deliver quicker. Would urban transport, for instance, in cities outside London have a bigger impact on growth more quickly?
Yeah, it seems that Rachel Reeves has a love affair with the letter R. If it's not runways, it's reservoirs. That's another area, of course, that's been, you know, we've talked about it many times over the years. It's been lacking. There's been a problem, but it will perhaps mean more reservoirs to get those things built. They're pretty big old beasts, also require lots of planning permission too. We could be looking at higher bills there as well.
Well, look, it's the right thing to do, though. I mean, these things take a long time to build, but if you're not identifying what we're going to need over the next decades, then you're suddenly going to be left short of infrastructure. And I think one of the problems we've had for the last 15 years has been that the government has cut investment spending, and many of these decisions haven't been taken. So I think this is what's to be welcomed, is that she is looking to the future. She's putting in place the plans. OK, they may take longer than we think, but at least the plans are happening, and some of this investment will take place.
A lot of this, surely, Ashwin, is about creating the mood music, right? It's setting a tone, a direction of travel. You know, we're a government that's about growth. We're about the future, as you just said. You know, we're about being open for business.
I think that's right. And I think it's worth just reflecting on the timing of the budget. We had the budget on the 30th of October. And in that budget, we had two separate things announced. One was we had obviously the taxation, the employers' national insurance contributions. But the other thing is we had quite a lot of spending on public services announced. Now, neither of those are going to kick in until the 6th of April, the new financial year. But it's a lot easier for businesses to identify what they're going to have to pay. But they're also going to see some benefits from the higher public expenditure because, people are going to have more wages in their pockets where they're being paid to work on various investment projects. Staff who hadn't had a pay rise in public services will be getting a bit more of a pay rise. So all of that will be a benefit to businesses. But it's quite understandable that businesses see the negative a bit more clearly than they see the positive.
Yeah.
So we're in a situation where people are being more negative about the budget and not quite being balanced. And so I think it's a good thing that picture is being rebalanced and the focus on what the money can be spent on and the growth it can produce is returning to the conversation.
But is the credibility of the government compromised on this? Because, a lot of people would go, well, why didn't she say all of this stuff in the budget, or at least sound as if this was the direction of travel? She obviously can't make all of those announcements. We get that. But, you've now got this huge hullabaloo going on in the cabinet because the third runway thing in particular, that's going to divide the room. We know that Ed Miliband is, at the moment sitting crying in the corner of a room in his office because he can't quite believe what has happened. So it's about trust, isn't it? And governments and confidence and all of those things go together. For an economy to grow, you need to have, or you certainly need the perception, if nothing else, that what you have is a credible team and a credible plan.
You're right. You do need that credibility, and the reality is it takes time to come to pass. You don't earn that credibility instantly. The previous government, we had the Liz Truss budget, we had interest rates shooting up, and then we had a bit of a sense that the Conservatives were expecting to lose the next election, the following election, and so they were scrabbling around for anything that might give them some popularity and improve their fortunes at the polls.
Yep.
And so that created a sense that economic policy was all about short-termism. I think we've got a government with a stable majority. Sometimes we have to hold our nerve. It would have been, the government can't announce everything on one day, and bit by bit, some of these measures which they've promised and they've signalled will actually start to be announced and then actually start to be delivered.
Just finally, Ashwin, was there one thing there you were hoping to hear the Chancellor say? Was there a big announcement that you thought, if only she'd have said that, we'd have really been in business?
So I think it's about the transport investment to connect up the major cities of the north of England. When we compare ourselves to other countries in Europe, for instance, the cities outside the main city do a lot better than our cities outside the main city. And so one of the things that we have to do is to create a situation where if you live in Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, York, you can travel very quickly between them, and that you can create the economies of scale and create better, bigger businesses. So I'd like to see more investment in that transport, that band across the north of England, and that would really help to drive growth.
Yeah, indeed. Ashwin, thanks for your time. Really appreciate that. Professor Ashwin Kumar, the economist at the Institute for Public Policy Research. Specifically on that issue of the runway, though, let's speak with Paul Beckford, Policy Director at No Third Runway. Good afternoon to you, Paul.
Afternoon, Ian. Thanks for having me on.
It's a pleasure. I'm going to take a wild guess here that based on the name of your organisation, you are probably against a third runway.
Yeah, well, like Ron said, it does what it says on the tin.
Absolutely right. So this announcement today would not have been good news.
No, very disappointing day. But, let's put it into context. We've been campaigning actively since 2017. Many of our members and residents that we represent have been campaigning against the third runway since the early 2000s. So we're prepared for the fight. We're ready to go again. And, we knew this was going to come back at some point. Heathrow always wants to grow. That's in the nature of their business.
Yeah. What's wrong with the third runway, though? More commerce, more business. It's what planes do. They need somewhere to land. And surely you get a bigger airport, you get more business coming in, more tourists coming in. What's not to like?
Well, there's a number of issues. On the tourist point, we're actually in a tourism deficit. We export about £43 billion every year to the rest of the world that we could be spending domestically. That's facilitated through aviation and other forms of transport and tourism. On the third runway itself, the economic case has always been fairly weak. And in fact, I think some of the announcements today, there's a new analysis done, which we've yet to see, but they've revised down job figures already. The economic benefit over a 60-year period was around 60 billion in the initial assessment, so $1 billion a year. It's about the price of a cup of tea for everybody in the country, so it's not that big an uplift. And actually, when you look in the government's own analysis, they revised that down when you look at the net present value, so the cost and the benefits together. And at best, it may produce a 3 billion uplift, and at worst, maybe a 2 billion cost to the economy. Then you add on the top of that the fact that 75% of the passengers using any third runway would be what's international transfer passengers, and the DfT's own guidance say you shouldn't be using any benefit from those passengers. They don't contribute anything to the economy because they simply switch planes at Heathrow. So adding extra capacity to what's already the most connected airport in the world gives you very marginal return, hardly any value. You'd be far better off trying to direct aviation traffic to the unused capacity at regional airports around the country.
Is your contention an environmental argument, or is it because you happen to have a house near a runway?
No, I personally don't live under the flight path, so I'm here speaking on behalf of those that do.
Yep.
But yeah, the environmental impact's huge. If you've built a third runway, you're talking about around 2 million more people on top of the 700,000 already impacted by aircraft noise being exposed to levels of noise pollution which cause negative health impacts. In terms of air pollution, Heathrow is already a hotspot for nitrogen dioxide, as well as ultrafine particulates you find as far away as central London caused by aircraft. So there's huge health impacts there, and we're only just really beginning to understand in terms of the academic research around how badly this impacts people's health. And on carbon, the big one is 9 megatons additional carbon from a third runway every year. That'll take aviation up to the 2050 mark, where they will be a quarter of all our aviation emissions. Now, I know some people say, it's a global industry, we have to take global action. I agree with that. We should be reducing it. And my problem is around the investment in sustainable aviation fuels or hydrogen or electric flights. We are not seeing the pace of progress by industry that's required for them to decarbonise in time. And what that means is there's going to be extra pressure on other sectors of the economy to decarbonise faster, more quickly, or maybe even have to place restrictions. So there needs to be an integrated strategy here. And at the moment, we're not hearing that from government.
Remember a few years ago, Boris Johnson, who was also against the third runway, he's not normally a man I would cite when it comes to a reference of trust, but he came up with this idea of an island, didn't he, off the coast that could be an airport with some runways and stuff, and it kind of got laughed at because they called it Boris's Island, as if it was some kind of funny joke. But there was actually a very serious argument there, and some still advocate that that's probably the ideal thing. An island that's away from the shore might not be the best of all plans, but many said that would be better than a third runway at Heathrow.
Something that the Airports Commission looked at several years ago when they went through this process comparing where to put extra capacity. The French moved Charles de Gaulle, I believe, and they were moved on airports. Hong Kong moved their airport. So these things are possible. And if you were starting from scratch, you wouldn't put a Heathrow airport in the location that it is. It's around the most congested and most populated area of the country. So maybe you would start and put a full runway hub somewhere else. Ideally, maybe connected to a high-speed rail network so people can get there without having to jump in their cars. But yeah, I mean, the Boris Island idea, as you cite, has been long dead and isn't floated at the moment. And obviously, the impact of that, you would have to, government would have to compulsorily purchase Heathrow, and all those businesses that in the Thames Valley and that are located precisely to be next to Heathrow would then have to move as well. So I think there's huge logistical problems, not least the cost to a deal like that.
Well, it takes forever to fill a pothole. God knows how much it takes to fill the sea to make an island. We would watch with interest. Paul, thank you very much. Paul Beckford, he's Policy Director at No Third Runway. Over to you, 0344 499 1000. That is where you will find us. Comments on the specifics of the runway thing. Many suggesting, Julia mentioned it to me earlier, probably never going to happen anyway. There'll be too many objections. You heard what was said with Ashwin, our previous guest, The Economist, that the planning permission will take until 2030. So 5 years to get planning permission. Wouldn't that just be a case of filling the form out online? And then it goes to the council meeting a week on Tuesday, and they go, point number 7 in the meeting, runway at Heathrow, all those 4, yes, no, yet carried, brilliant, it's done. Apparently it doesn't work that fast. Nothing works that fast here. And, of course, the wider issue of Rachel Reeves. Has Ricochet Rach delivered a blinder? Has she turned your view on the ineptitude, fiscally speaking, of this government? She's got some support from many right-wing areas on the economic spectrum who said, you know what, this is the kind of thing we want to hear, apart from the possibility of tax rises, she's in the right ballpark. Can she, Rachel Reeves, revive our economy? 0344 499 1000. Coming up on 10 to 2. This is Talk.
How is the economy going to grow? Exactly.
So if you look at trade finance plays a fundamental role in financing and enabling trade. Very, very important.
Trade with who?
Suffocating in...
Well, trade with who?
Sorry?
Trade with who?
The rest of the world.
So you want so who's going to create the products that you're going to sell to the rest of the world?
We've got thousands of good companies all up and down the country who trade every day of the week.
Right.
That could be trading more. Terrific brands.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Let's get to the calls. This is Steve, who's in Leeds, on Reeves. How you doing, Steve?
Afternoon, Ian. I'm fine. How are you?
Good as gold, thank you. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Couple of things. Rachel Reeves has just admitted that the government are not going to get any growth in the next 5 years.
Yep.
The only plan for growth is to build a runway in 5 years. So
yes.
That doesn't help now. Yeah, so she's basically said, our only plan for growth is in 5 years' time, because we haven't got any other plan. Second, she's just proved that she lied to Parliament, for which she should be sacked. Because in the budget last year, she said, and I quote, "The actions I take now will mean there's no need for any tax rises in March."
Right. So...
She said those words. If you look back at her speech in Parliament, in front of every MP, she said, "The actions I take now will mean that we require no more tax rises in March." And now she said she's not ruled them out. So she put tax rises on and she lied to Parliament. We sacked Boris for that.
I'm not defending her at all, because I 100% agree with you, but can politicians form a different defence to that? Can they say, well, look, when I said that, I absolutely meant it, but circumstances have changed, what am I meant to do? Is that good enough?
Then Boris Johnson, when I said I didn't have a party, I actually out that you realised I did. I've changed my mind.
Yeah.
Therefore, it's not a lie. Sorry, what she should have said was, I have no plans to increase taxes at this moment. But she actually said they will not have to be increased because of what I've done now.
Yeah.
That's a definite. So either you lie or you tell the truth. One more thing here, yeah? In Yorkshire, we have a saying. There's two people in the world. The does do and the gonna do. Parliament's full of gonna do's. They're always gonna do something, but never actually do something. Yeah.
You're spot on.
I'm going to do this. I'm going to do... Yeah, fine, great. Get on and do it.
Get on and do it. That's all we want to see. Steve, thank you. Steve in Leeds. Simon in Devon says, 5 years planning for a third runway at Heathrow is an absolute joke. You know it's going to cost $500 million in planning alone. China would have had it built in 6 months. In fact, I've just designed one using ChatGPT. Took me 30 seconds. We're not a serious country, but you get my point, which is a fair point as well. Pete says on Twitter, it's not just the runway that needs building, it's the infrastructure that needs running it, software systems, new equipment, storage hangars, management of income, exporting, etc. That's very true, and I get it. If it was going to take, I don't know, 2 years, I could go, yeah, to get all of that up and running, might take you a couple of years. A lot of stuff you got to work out. But much of that, for example, software systems, you would imagine are already in place, would just have to be modified for the location of a new runway, etc. You know, and building a Costa inside the lounge, I mean, how long's that going to take? They knock those things up in about 30 days. David is in London on Rachel Reeves. David, afternoon to you.
Hi, Ian. Ian, I'm sorry to say it, but I don't think Rachel Reeves will be able to stimulate the economy.
Okay.
Good economies need cheap energy and open roads. There's nothing cheap about renewables, and serious decisions about our roads are put into the hands of cycling zealots who have no concern for business or indeed any other road users except themselves, and our roads have been and continue to be ruined by them.
So what do you sense then in terms of the bigger plan of this government? I mean, do you think they have a plan, or do you think they are, you know, merely throwing out strong words about growth, but underneath it all there's very little to see?
I think they live in cloud cuckoo land, Ian. How can they not see the roads, Park Lane, any roads around the country that have been squeezed by this ridiculous cycling? This is a cycling...
The ULEZ and the two wheels and the cycles, exactly. And there's an absolute obsession. You'd nowhere else in life. I say this all the time, David. You would never get away with going to the council and say, I want to spend £500 million on something that's going to be used by 1% of the population.
Yeah, and, you know, cyclists and car drivers need to learn to work as a team. We don't have wide roads like they do in Amsterdam.
100%. Yeah.
Ian, this cycling project is going to be nothing but an extraordinarily expensive experiment.
Well, getting people to take up cycling is like getting people to take up billiards. You know, once in a while somebody will do it, but on balance, most people will go, yeah, I'd rather take the car or the bus. Thank you, David, for that. Here's a voice note on that third runway. Comes from Judy.
Why is everything for London a new runway? We've got an airport up north, Robin Hood. It's been shut down. Why don't they open it up? It'd be cheaper and fly lots of planes in from there. Expand. The world doesn't begin and end with London.
Indeed, I 100% agree with Judy's point there. I don't think it's about, you know, like, oh, we want it for London because lots of MPs live in London. I don't think it's that. I mean, it happens to be the big economic hub financially of, you know, Europe, and in some respects, you know, one of the biggest in the world, and therefore a lot of cross travel happens there. But I think they should be able to do both. I get that, you know, a capital city might have bigger airports and bigger stuff going on. I understand that, whether it's in France, Germany, the UK. But Judy is absolutely right. You know, let's get some stuff going on in the northeast. Let's get stuff going on in the northwest, the southwest. You know, there needs to be more everywhere. Here's a call from Brian down in London on Heathrow. What have you got for us, Brian?
Hello, Ian. I'll be quick, mate.
Yeah.
Lots and lots wrong with this Heathrow expansion. I've noticed you've had a lot of callers in favour. It's like they've, you know, they're astrosurfing.
Yeah.
People have got involved. Well, I'll tell you why I'm against it. I was on this committee called Stop Heathrow Expansion, and let's talk about the housing crisis. We're going to knock down 500 houses to start with. and then you're going to make thousands more uninhabitable while we've got a housing crisis. You've got poverty in them areas, and I live around there, okay? Harmless with poverty because the airport does not pay well. The good jobs, you haven't got to live locally. You can live in France and be a pilot, but the airport relies on the welfare state to produce low-paid jobs, and there's a lot of poverty in our area. The other thing is ownership. No one's mentioned this. There's only 10% of Heathrow is owned by the UK, and that is the lecturers' USS pension fund. The rest of it is the Chinese government, Qatari government, Singapore government, and Montreal teachers pension funds. Okay?
Don't the Spanish have a little toe in the water as well over there? Listen, I've got to step in, Brian. I get your point. It's a very good point about ownership as well. We've got a degree in flogging our infrastructure to other countries. See Energy for detail. The French love us for that. And our trains. 0344 499 1000 is where you will find us. Can Rachel Reeves revive the economy? Ain't just going to... I mean, the Heathrow Airport is going to get all the big headlines. There's much more to it than that. Kevin Schofield joins us to look at PMQs and other stories in a few moments' time. Right now, let's get the latest news headlines at 2 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back. 3 minutes after 2 o'clock. What do we got? A busy one. So we're absolutely chocker at this end. Chancellor Rachel Reeves refusing to rule out further tax rises in spring, confirming, though, the government's support for Heathrow's third runway. This is all about boosting Britain's economy. The amount of time she said the word growth. Do you know how many times? I'll tell you in just a couple of moments. I've got the actual answer here as well. Also this afternoon, households that only watch streaming services like Netflix or Disney Plus could soon be forced to still pay the BBC licence fee. They cannot get away with that. Come on. There's got to be a good lawyer out there or so I'll have this thing overturned in about half an hour. Well, look at that. And the NHS is run by bureaucrats who lack ideas and are obstructing the reforms needed to fix it, according to a new report by MPs. I do not struggle for one moment to believe that to be the case. Everything you need to know and all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. Kevin Schofield is with us, political editor of HuffPost UK. I mentioned the amount of time she used the word growth. 29,567. And then in the next hour, she did even more. It was, I mean, this was the whole point of that speech. We'll come to that in a second, Kevin. But first, you're fresh from PMQs. Obviously, as a journalist, a lobby journalist, you're there every week to watch the events unfold. Interested vantage point that you get there, looking down, arena style at the goings on. Seeing what is happening. So how did it go today? What were the big topics of debate, and how did Kemi Badenoch fare this time?
Yes, I think what we said a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? The criticism of her was that she'd asked 6 questions on 6 different things. It was all a bit of a muddle. And last week she focused on the education bill, trying to drill down into detail. Well, this week it was the employment bill. So clearly she's decided to change tack, become a bit more forensic. It doesn't make for great telly, I have to say. It doesn't make for great news when she starts talking about, part 1 of the bill and things like that. But, if it works for her, fair enough. She's obviously decided she's not interested in the media playing our game, really, and clips for social media and great sound.
Who's advising her on that, though? Because, on the other side, you've got, like, Rupert Lowe, Reform MB, who's punching well above his weight in terms of profile and questions, and he's getting in there. He's also being forensic, and although he's got some favoured themes, but he's getting there. It's a kind of Trump thing. He's getting the head. He's talking about stuff that people are talking about.
Absolutely. We do love a soundbite as journalists, and we're a bit of a sucker for it, really. And she's decided to sort of body swerve that approach. It doesn't get the pulses racing. I mean, it was a pretty meh performance, I would say. There was no gaffes. She didn't mess up. She wasn't hammered by the Prime Minister, because that's not really his style either. But it was just a bit nondescript, really. But again, as I say, she did this last week as well, so clearly this is the strategy now. She wants to forensically pick apart the issues as she sees it with government legislation. So this one today was about the employment bill, which is going to boost workers' rights. So the point she was making was, well, on the one hand, you've got Rachel Reeves making this big speech about growth. Well, how does that work alongside all these, what she would say, red tape regulations that are going to tie businesses in knots and are going to stifle economic growth? So she's making a valid point, I think, but just not in a very
it's quite difficult to have that argument. I mean, apart from, we live in a country with some of the best workers' rights on the planet, and I think when the EU sort of were drafting a lot of their workers' rights rules, they actually looked at ours and went, well, they're already doing it over there in the UK. Let's have some of that, make it Europe-wide, which is always interesting that when we left the EU, a lot of people said, oh, what about workers' rights? It's like, no, we've already got them. Don't worry about it. That bit's kind of safe. But, and she's right, probably, in the sense that Rachel Reeves talking about growth and at the same time talking about getting rid of red tape, and yet some of what they're doing is clearly going to increase red tape, certainly for employers.
Yeah, and there was one line in it where she said basically all you've done is improve rights for trade union bosses, and that got a huge cheer on the Labour side, because obviously they think that's a good thing. So I wonder whether further down the line that may be used against Labour,
if it was that clever, if she literally asked for that response so they could play it back in like 3 years' time.
Credit there.
I'd love to think somebody is behind Team Kemi that literally thought about that. If we do this, we'll get a cheer, then we'll do a party political broadcast and we'll show that clip.
I think when you say it like that, I'm not convinced you'll have more an argument. I mean, the best soundbite, and it actually did come from Starmer, where he said she's obviously not a lawyer, she's not a leader, and if she's not careful, she's going to end up a lettuce. So it's the old Liz Truss reference again, and again the Labour MPs loved that. So that was the one standout soundbite, and it didn't come from Kemi Badenoch.
Interesting. It's got just a bit dull, isn't it, PMQs? Back in the day when, you had, when Corbyn was there, I mean, at least it was lively, wasn't it?
It was lively, when it was him and Cameron at first, it was quite lively. I mean, it was Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer, it was quite lively as well, because they properly despise one another, and they were so different. You had the sort of massive character of Boris Johnson against the lawyerly approach of Keir Starmer, and that did quite often throw up some decent news lines. Sunak and Starmer wasn't bad on occasion, but thus far, I have to say, Badenoch versus Starmer's pretty. It's not exactly box office.
It's not box office, is it? It absolutely isn't. Let's move then to Rachel Reeves. Couple of points to look at here. And by the way, if I'd have been Kemi Badenoch, the first question I'd have asked is, could you tell us when the Energy Secretary is going to resign? Because I think that would have been very consistent. He wasn't there. He wasn't anywhere today, was he? He wasn't at the Ricochet Rachel's speech. He wasn't there for that, and he wasn't there at PMQC either.
I think it'll be a while. I think before he'll let the dust settle on the announcement before he sticks his head up again.
But that would you'd think, and it would be reasonable that an opposition leader would raise the point that, hang on, this is a man that, clearly central to everything he stands for, Ed Miliband, never used to, but suddenly does in the last couple of years, is net zero and, number one, public enemy number one, aeroplanes, they do the worst, more than cars and everything. We need to have less of it, not more of it. That would have been a classic case. Well, surely by his own reckoning, he would have to walk the plank.
Well, yeah, if he was consistent. I mean, this goes all the way back to 2009. He was Energy Secretary then as well under Gordon Brown.
That's very true.
And he threatened to resign over Heathrow, and in the end the government didn't back it. So this is not, this is a long-standing position he's had. Now, he was asked by an intrepid reporter last week when this was speculated that the government were going to back it, will you resign? And he was very rude, actually. He said, don't be ridiculous. So there's your answer. He's not going to resign, but it's also going to be deeply uncomfortable for him because there's all these quotes from the past.
Yeah.
How can you, on the one hand, support net zero, but also support expansion of airports? But then again, Keir Starmer was against it before the election.
True.
Now he supports it. So there's
funny what a chauffeur in a red box does for a person, isn't it? I might just stay in this job. And then, of course, they will concoct some kind of, well, don't worry, because it might look like it's environment. We're going to plant some trees in Cleethorpes, and that will offset the footprint.
That's one of the things, I think, is this Nature Restoration Fund. Apparently that's going to help compensate. But also, they're putting a lot of stall in more sustainable aviation fuel. So apparently the fuel is going to get much more sustainable. It's not going to pump out as many greenhouse gases. But I think they're kind of tying themselves in knots a little bit, trying to justify the fact that this is an announcement which really does go against what they've always been saying before.
I think so. I keep getting a lot of messages from people in Cleethorpes, because every time I make that reference, I say they're going to plant lots of trees in Cleethorpes, which is preposterous. There are no trees in Cleethorpes, and there never will be trees in Cleethorpes. Scunthorpe has all the trees, you see. That's the reason. The tax rises as well. She was challenged when asked a question about tax. She said she didn't say anything about, she couldn't rule out tax rises in the future. Very much, again, as a previous caller pointed out to us, she said before, there'll be no more tax rises, but, the OBR have got to have a little look at the books first.
Yeah.
So there might be.
There might be. I mean, I think it would be the absolute last resort, because politically it would just be catastrophic for Rachel Reeves, all the promises they made in the run-up to the election that they wouldn't have to increase taxes by any more than they were already promising to do, so on VAT, on private schools, for instance. But lo and behold, first budget, they whack up taxes by £40 billion, huge increase in employers' national insurance. Then she comes out and says, that's it, it was a once-in-a-parliament job. She tells the CBI, I won't have to do that again for the rest of the Parliament. Everyone's like, oh, that's quite a big announcement. And they've been rolled back ever so slightly since then. So I think she has to keep it in her locker, but knowing that if she ever was to increase taxes again, certainly as soon as this spring, that would be politically just catastrophic.
I would have thought
for her and for the government.
And I just wonder as well about the Heathrow thing, Kevin, whether this is really about mood music. Because there's been a lot of conversation that Labour have got it wrong economically, that the budget is kind of up there with Liz Truss's in the sense of what it's done to the economy and bonds and gilts and all that kind of stuff. And it's not a government that is business friendly. It's not a government that understands growth. And this Heathrow thing, as we've been establishing, it could take, a guest told us earlier, to get the planning permission could take 5 years. I mean, what do they do over there? What is that? Is that not just surely the count? You know, so the Heathrow bloke goes online and applies for the planning permission, and the local council go, "Is it a yay or a nay?" And they'll go, "Yeah." They go, "Yeah, fine, go on, build it."
Yeah.
How long does it take to build a flipping runway?
Well, I mean, there'll be all sorts of legal challenges as well, and
so there's all of that. And Labour know
reviews.
that, so it's not going to happen in this Parliament, and it possibly wouldn't happen in the second one either.
I think you're looking at minimum 10 years before it is actually up and running,
which is nonsense in itself.
Well,
if you are pro a third runway,
that's part of the problem. So, in practical terms, no, it's not going to grow the economy. Certainly, this side of certainly not the 2030s, and possibly not till the middle of the 2030s.
They often say that when men get talking, specifically men. That all roads, no pun, lead to a Roman reference. You've heard that.
Yeah,
you go back to the road.
yeah.
And of course, I couldn't help it. I didn't realise I did it at the very beginning. But of course, a runway is literally a straight road, as given to us by the Romans. I cannot get now. You may not know this, but I've never built a runway before.
Seriously?
And I've got a funny feeling, don't want to speak on your behalf, Kevin, I don't think you have either. I know you're handy with a bit of tarmac if you have to be.
Yeah, I've never got around to it.
But you've never actually built a runway.
No.
But even we could probably, I think, take an educated guess. I mean, how long does it take to build a big straight road?
Yeah, you imagine the practical terms, there's not a lot of design work.
Let's get this one worked out.
There's not a lot of design work.
Yeah, what's the design? What's the aesthetics of that?
We must have a ruler in here somewhere.
It's like 2 miles long, it's this wide, and it's made of very deep concrete.
But presumably they have to get authorisation for the land that they use, and obviously there's lots of houses which are going to have to be flattened, so there's compulsory purchase orders and all that type of thing. That's why there's so much opposition in the local area.
So from people who chose to move to in a house near an airport.
It's a bit like HS2, obviously. Lots of people, lots of people made to it, and look how that ended up.
That's very true. I'm still flummoxed, and lots of people are referencing China. If China wanted to build a runway, they'd have it done by about June. And they genuinely would, somehow. Let's move then to this story. Labour considering forcing households that only use Netflix to pay the BBC licence. Now, the argument for the BBC licence has been kind of diminishing almost by the hour lately, and it's very hard, even though once upon a time I had a kind of romantic notion about the BBC. It's thinking back of being a kid, Saturday night telly, Generation Game, Starsky and Hutch, all of that, those heady days. But actually, I don't think anybody can intellectually defend it. The only defence is a romantic one.
Yeah, I think people like the BBC and they certainly don't want it to see it go. But the idea that in order to own a television you must have a licence is, it is frankly bizarre in this day and age. Not least because lots of people now watch TV online, on laptops, on tablets. They don't actually physically ever turn on a television. So clearly the justification for making you have a licence fee if you don't have a telly does seem absolutely bizarre.
There's two things that will always bamboozle an American. One is telling them about the fact that if you are freelance or self-employed, you pay tax for the year to come before you've even earned it. And they're like, what, so you let the government take your money before you've earned it? I mean, that goes against every convention in American thinking. They can't believe that. And the other one is the licence fee. The idea that you pay a licence for a television. I mean, talk about unfair taxes. That's right up there.
It's quite a quaint notion, really, and as I say, it's one that's it's been and gone as a concept, I think. But there needs to be a replacement way of funding the national state broadcaster. I think making people who don't own a television or don't even watch the BBC or say they don't watch the BBC pay a licence fee if they only ever watch Netflix or Paramount or Disney, whatever. I think that one, I don't ever see that one flying, really.
Could they ever come up with, a lot of people often say, and it bothers me because, of course, there's lots of issues around the licence fee. Not only is it hard to defend it was hard to sometimes defend even before multi-channel TV and digital platforms and the like, but now it's almost impossible. But every now and again, and of course it's unfair to it's often, certainly with news, if you're local newspapers and local journalism struggle as well, because how can they go up again? If you wanted to start a newspaper in your own town, forget it, because you can't go up against the might of the BBC.
Yeah.
But then there's a counter-argument that some say that in a world of kind of, where Elon Musk wants you to treat Twitter as your default news platform, which is about the funniest thing anyone could ever say if you're into news. I mean, I know you could search it out if you want to spend a few hours and might find the truth in there somewhere. But could the BBC say, right, OK, it's just going to be news. It's 20 quid a year, and we'll knock down all the current conventions of BBC News, and we will start again, and we will have the greatest global independent news source on the planet. Could they do that?
I mean, I guess they could make an argument for that, but I think most people probably associate the BBC now with TV programmes. Your Attenborough, big set piece things like that, comedies, or broadcasting huge national events like the Queen's funeral, that type of thing, which I think people are quite happy to pay for, but not via a compulsory licence, whereby if you don't have one and you're found to be watching the BBC, you could end up in the jail.
Yeah.
In an like that, I think is difficult to argue for. But then the question becomes, well, how do you fund it? Do you let them have adverts, for instance? Why, if you have adverts on other channels, why not the BBC? That could be one.
Channel 4 was also government owned in that respect.
Has that, and I think people could deal with that. People don't mind that. So I think it's up for debate. I think clearly the licence fee is going to end at some point, probably sooner rather than later. But it won't mean the end of the channel or the broadcaster. It'll just mean it will need to be replaced by something which is going to have to be practically effective, but also carry public opinion. And I think that's where the danger is for the government on this one. But this idea certainly is bonkers, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and they just don't know who they are, really, And I caught a bit of that Laura Koonsberg thing at the weekend. I've never seen that. Once I stopped watching the Andrew Marr show years ago. I wrote about this in a book because I got very upset about the opening titles, because I didn't like the idea that Andrew Marr was put on a moped, do you remember that?
London,
like some kind of Poirot character. They had sort of mysterious music. Here comes quirky Andrew to sort out the... And then I thought, it's not the David Letterman show, for God's sake. And then they do a similar thing with Koonsberg, where they have these sort of openings of her walking through this kind of path to Westminster or whatever it is, some sort of animated backdrop. It's like, let's stop trying to make celebrities out of political journalists and stop saying, doing a big debate about, in a moment we're going to talk about the goings-on in Gaza and the terrible death rate. But before we do that, here's Kerry Mulligan. And they do an interview with a Hollywood agent. Stop that. Marr used to have a band, didn't he?
He did. He used to have a band, and that used to...
annoy me.
It used to annoy a lot of people, actually. Because, on the one hand, you'd spend 20 minutes interviewing the Prime Minister or some foreign leader over some really, really important heavy-duty stuff, and then you'd have... can't think of a...
it was terrible. It was worse than that, because I remember, I think Gordon Brown was on there once, because what they would do...
you would see them watching it.
You would see them watching it. So Andrew Marr would go, thank you for watching, and now with their, fresh from their new album, here's Pete's Got Scurvy, or whatever they were called. So the band would start playing, and there'd be Gordon Brown, vaguely tapping his foot to this band. It was a horror show.
I had sort of PTSD, I think. I had kind of wiped that from my memory, but I do remember it, and it always was just a little bit odd.
Yeah, and they had Paul McCartney on the Koonsberg thing at the weekend, and, I think she did the introduction by saying, with us is Paul McCartney off the Beatles.
Not the other one.
Or the other one.
Just to make sure you know who he is.
Well, there was a conspiracy about Paul McCartney.
He died, wasn't he?
He died.
Back in
the day. And actually, Paul McCartney that we know today is not the original Paul McCartney.
Which is why they said he had bare feet on the cover of Abbey Road.
Abbey Road, that's right.
For some reason that signified that it was a body double and the real Paul was dead.
I think I interviewed somebody on that who felt very strongly that
You'll always find people who will believe that.
But it's up there with the moon landing stuff.
Elvis works in the local chippy.
Absolutely. Well, no, that's true, isn't it? Have you never been to Cod's Place in Bromley?
It's Scunthorpe, no?
Sorry, that's the one. That's the one. Kevin, thank you. Good to see you. Kevin Schofield, political editor at HuffPost UK, with us on the programme. Lots to get into there. Your response is 0344 499 1000.
going back to trade again. We have a roadmap. We know exactly what needs to be done. The short term, the wins are short term. We can deliver growth quickly, but we've got to get on with it, and we've got to take action straight away, and we've got to respond to the challenge to go further faster. I fully agree with that.
Well, yeah, but that's all just gobbledygook, isn't it? I mean, you're talking in kind of riddles. You're saying go further, go faster, you know, employ more people, you know, stimulate the economy, get involved in trade. Who's going to do that when they've got less money than they had last year?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
From Mark, who says the BBC charging a licence fee for someone watching another streaming service like Netflix or Prime would be like me travelling on a bus and buying a bus ticket, then a train company charging me for a train ticket on a completely different journey that I didn't go on just for travelling somewhere on a bus. Is completely ridiculous. Ian points this out, which happens to be true, but it's an uncomfortable truth. The licence fee is not based on you watching the BBC. The licence fee allows you to watch a live TV broadcast. I would love not to pay the licence fee, as I don't watch the BBC, but I need a licence fee to watch talkTV. You see, there's something in that, isn't there? You can, if you haven't got a TV at all, then you can. What's the deal there with a laptop? If you're watching it on a laptop, I think that also carries some ramifications as well. But it sort of exposes the ridiculousness of it, because if it's not about the BBC, but it's about just having a unit to broadcast on, which ITV and Channel 5 and others aren't saying they need some of that money. They don't get any of that money. Only the BBC get that money, and a few other little morsels go elsewhere, but broadly speaking, that's the deal. Then what we're living in is a country where the government insists you pay a tax to watch the telly in the 21st century, which is a nonsense. Andrew is in Hertfordshire. On runways, Andrew, what do you think of Rachel's runway? What are your thoughts?
Well, you just can't. Nice segue from your conspiracy theories into this.
Absolutely right. We jump all over the place.
Yeah, it's a conspiracy theory put round by Rachel from customer support. It's never going to be built, ever in our lifetime. Straight away, the Mayor of London is taking it to the courts. That is the end of it. It died today, the minute she announced it. It's going to the courts. It'll take 7 to 9 years to go through the environmental assessment and take that through the courts. It's a nothing statement. We're in recession. They've got no plan. This is nothing. Conversely, look at Trump. He's doing things. He's building things. All she had to come out today and say was, we're going to dig for oil fracking and we're going to pump gas out the North Sea. I'm going to reduce energy costs. They got a plan. We're done.
So this was her attempt to make it sound like she's pro-growth and a little bit rebellious, and I'm going against all those other politicians that stood in the way of this, knowing full well that this can't happen. If it did happen, it'd be about 30 years away.
It's the same as a review into the defence spending. Remember, the 26th of March is the big day in this country. That's when the OBR publishes the facts. We're in recession and we need more cash. The unions are back in for more cash. She's got no plan. Nothing changes at all as a result of these assessments for 7 to 9 years, and then it's just a court case.
Yeah.
This is shambolic, Ian.
So the whole process, as we said before, apparently 5 years of planning permission. On top of that, legal challenges, environmental considerations, the house purchasing of those homes that would be affected, the rebuilding of those homes for people who have been displaced, blah, blah, blah. It would, even if you were going to do it, let's say you were going to do it and you meant it, you'd be looking at maybe a decade or more to even start, digging the hole.
Yeah, and look at that gold rush on Sky. up in the Yukon, when they want to dig a hole for gold, they just dig it.
Yeah.
So digging the hole's not the problem. Not at all.
I mean, that's got to be the issue. I know I keep making light of it, but I genuinely don't believe that building a runway, literally building the runway, takes 10 years.
No, you've got the people there, the machinery, and you've got a way to get rid of the overburden and somewhere to take it. Once you plan that all out, the actual digging the hole, that's a very straightforward process. It's very similar to you going in the canteen and getting a cup of coffee. It's all set up there to provide that for you.
And all the people, you know, while they're digging up the field to build the runway, all the people whose homes have been removed from them could be given a free lawn for their new house, made from the field that the runway's in. What a nice little extra.
Yeah, you often get those people knocking on your door trying to sell you tarmac.
Would you like some tarmac? Yeah.
It had to go in the Thames. You get a Thames barrier, you get a crossing across the Thames, and then you compromise the misery that this is going to cause. Free that up for London, knock down all the high-rise housing, social housing, put it all out at Heathrow. It's a great plan, but can't do it. It's nothing. We're in recession. This is the beginning of the first nail in her coffin.
Yeah, there it is. Interesting times. Andrew, thank you for that. Kevin says, I don't need a TV licence. My telly works fine without one. Do you know, I was having a mooch last night looking through, you know, I've got an hour, I don't want to go to bed yet. And I hopped over to iPlayer on the TV, and I was just looking at, well, I was looking firstly at the sort of interface of the whole thing, of how kind of deeply unattractive it was compared to its competitors, if that's the right way, like Disney Plus or Netflix and Prime and the like. And there was really, it said continue watching, and it was something I'd watched about 8 months ago. It shows you the last time I was watching the BBC. And it was a programme about surgeons, and I hadn't even watched all of that. And then I went to Netflix, as you do. It's a bit of a default place now, and I was looking through that, and this sort of bright, shiny plethora of choice threw up to me. And there's lots, you know, to brand new shows on season 2, stuff that's from the States, stuff that's domestically made. I mean, just so much on there, all nicely laid out. The top of what, you know, kind of chart-based, you know, 1 to 10 of what is being watched at the moment. Documentaries there, comedy there, films if you want a bit of that, old stuff that you haven't seen for a while. Making a Murderer. Do you remember Making a Murderer? How many? Did you watch that, Adam? Making a Murderer, which was the... Right, there it is. Absolutely. What Adam just said to me in my ear was, that's why I signed up to Netflix. Making a Murderer, which was the first of those big, like, oh my God, you've got to watch this. This is just going to keep you hooked forever. An extraordinary documentary of something in the States. And it's amazing how many people now, how many younger people are not aware of that. They're talking about all the other stuff. But it's those kind of programmes, that kind of choice, and, you know, when it comes to entertainment and TV, that sort of excitement, if you like. 0344 499 1000. Harry Cole is the political editor at The Sun. He's going to join us in a couple of moments. Never mind, the ballots is out. His programme is out there. We'll get some detail on that. And, of course, his overview on where he thinks Rachel Reeves has gone right, or has she gone spectacularly wrong? All of that and more on the way. And, of course, your calls. If you're hanging on, don't go away. We'll get as many voices as we can on all the big issues of the day. Just gone 2:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
25 to 2. We have the Sun's political editor Harry Cole with us in the studio. Fresh from that interview, there's just time for Never Mind the Balance. Was it an extra show or an early show this week?
Yeah, we were sort of off the back of Rachel Reeves' speech. We thought we'd speak to the Treasury and put some concerns to them. I mean, that whole speech seems to be a complete acceptance that they've got it wrong so far. And all that doom and gloom we heard from July, August, September, all those emergency press conferences and speeches and clips to cameras basically saying the country's going down the Swanee. Yeah. And now we've got this new Chancellor, you know, it's like, who's the new girl? Like, suddenly she's like, everything's great, Britain's brilliant, we can do this, we can do that, we can do that, which I think is a sort of tacit acceptance, I mean, not even that tacit, a pretty clear acceptance that, you know, they've almost talked the country into a recession. They have spooked the markets, they've spooked business confidence. And the sort of point I was trying to get to Darren Jones earlier was, you know, you're a cabinet of trade unionists, lawyers, you know, life career politicians. Yeah. No one's actually ever run a business. So why should we believe them when they say, oh, everything's fine, rather than talking to bosses and employers who are saying, ow, everything's hurting.
So was this a PR thing? I mean, did they sit there and everything you've just said correctly, Harry, where they thought, hang on a second, you know, it's all about mood music as well, you know, direction of intent. Look at what's happening with Trump, and in America there's a real sense of euphoria, a new beginning. Labour have had none of that.
I think so. I mean, two things. One, you know, the way that we run this country is slightly mad in the fact that you go in from an election campaign, 6, 7, 8 weeks on the road, and then when you're at peak exhaustion, they put you straight into the Treasury. Or straight into the Treasury. You don't get, you know, whereas Trump's clearly spent the last 3 months on this transition period working out this, you know, big, you know, sort of blitz to start off with a bit of time to sort of, I don't think we'll ever change it, but it is really interesting to see him really hit the ground running.
It's a very good point, because you get the job at around about sort of 10 o'clock on a Thursday night. And the next day you are literally in Downing.
Exactly, and then on the Monday morning you've got to basically make sure that everything, the team you've put in place and everything you've said so far isn't going to scare the markets. And I think that's what Labour, the problem that Labour had was that they were sort of slightly haunted by their last time in power and the sort of 70s and their reputation as, you know, lefties, which, you know, kind of some of them are, some of them aren't. That actually I think they were so keen to keep the city on board, big finance, the big investment firms, the pension firms. They didn't want the markets to sort of immediately reject them. That actually everything they've done actually has been quite pro, you know, sort of really high finance, and actually they've shoveled the burden onto people that make things and employ people and smaller businesses. And that's, I think, the real contradiction at the heart of this government is they say they're on the side of business, but it depends what business. If it's, you know, if it's big international finance, they love it. If it's small businesses, they're really feeling it.
They love a bit of BlackRock. Exactly. They like a bit of Bloomberg. You know,
and they like them.
Yeah, indeed. They're up for all of that. And of course, you know, when he was in opposition, or just leading up to being Prime Minister, on things like, you know, I'm thinking about Israel, for example, you know, where he was far more forthright than Rishi Sunak was initially, you know, about our position and making sure that we protect and Israel's right to defend. And Starmer was very quick on that.
I think the problem is that what's taken them a long time to work out is they're not in opposition anymore. And when they say, and we can talk about this again, and we've talked about it till the cows come home. When you say something in opposition, you can chuck rocks, you can be a bit more forthright. Look at Nigel Farage. You know, look at the way Kemi Bednack now and what the Tories are saying. When they were in government, they were saying almost the opposite. The problem, I think, that Reeves and co didn't really realise to begin with, actually you can move markets and you can move confidence and you can move trust very, very, very quickly when you are the government.
Absolutely.
And actually they came in and they talked down the country and they said everything's, I nearly swore. I always swear on this show, you have to dump me occasionally. You know, they came in, they didn't realise, I think the power of their words actually really did have a knock-on effect. They took the highest growth in the G7 at the beginning of 2024 and, you know, the end of 24, the last 2 quarters, flatlining.
Absolutely.
I put some of this to Darren Jones, and he didn't exactly defend himself.
Let's have a listen. This is Harry talking to Darren Jones. He's the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, essentially the number 2 to Rachel Reeves, and asking him essentially what he thought about Reeves' decisions as Chancellor.
You've increased taxes, you've pushed borrowings to the absolute limit, you've destroyed business confidence, you killed growth. This is all panic, isn't it? This is a good case to sack the Chancellor.
Oh, complete rubbish. Come on, look, you saw today a strong Chancellor in control of the agenda for this country.
Or a panicking Chancellor pivoting and trying to U-turn?
Panicking. You're creating a fiction, Harry.
Would you like the job if she...
It was a great speech today, setting out this government's agenda, why the plan for change is working. The plan for change that the British people voted for with a historic landslide for a Labour government. We're getting on with the job of the change that we promised in delivering, and that is a great thing for the country.
It's like somebody opened a packet of politicians, isn't it? There is these set templates.
He's a very silky man, actually, Darren. He's very sort of polished. He's very good. He's very clearly a very smart guy. Yeah. Look, I just think that what they can't answer and what they probably won't admit is that they probably should have done this. This is what they should have been saying on day one. A bit of optimism. And then Rachel Reeves said, we need a bit of Trump-like optimism. There is definitely an argument to that. In actually, they are exceptionally. I think they've been too gloomy, too Eeyore. And words matter. And look, if they do all the things they're going to say, they said they're going to do today, and they really do take on the sort of the blob, the regulatory blob. Great. I think your listeners and my readers will have some. Will need to go some way to believing that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer, two basically technocratic people, are going to be the new Maggie Thatcher and Keith Joseph and Nigel Lawson and have this new sort of big bang of deregulation. I'll believe it when I see it. But absolutely good intentions. But now let's see the colour of their money.
The inside world of Westminster, Harry, you know what's going on. We've got a bit of a countdown going here. Countdown to Ed Miliband's resignation, because surely anyone who's been that evangelical about net zero would walk the plank the minute you announced Heathrow expansion. As we sit here today, we're about 3 hours, 50 minutes in from when she announced it. He's still there. He wasn't at the speech. He wasn't at PMQs, but he's still in the job.
Where's Millie, as they say?
Where's Millie? We want to know. He's not resigned, and he's not likely to, because he likes a chauffeur in a big red box.
I don't know if it's that. I think it's more the zeal of the cause. If he can swallow Heathrow, he can pretty much swallow anything. Yeah. But what he's doing under the scenes, it's interesting actually, because he's been a minister before. Actually, the ones that are the most
in this brief as well.
Yeah, in this brief, the ones that know the departments have worked out why. The ones that were in the last Labour government seem to be the most effective ministers. And you can disagree, and I do disagree a lot with some of what Ed Miliband is doing. But he's very effective as a minister. So actually, I don't think he will resign. I think he'll sit there and just keep pushing that boat further and further out. And he'll win some and he'll lose some, but the ones he wins, are the ones that actually aren't as sexy as Heathrow or as sort of controversial, but will have much of an impact there. But he's there to stop basically any backtracking on North Sea oil and gas.
But does it not dilute their credibility somewhat on their own, by their own words, by their own reckoning? Net zero, this is, what it's all about. This is, planes are worse than cars. We don't do that stuff here anymore. That was for the previous lot to do. We're reducing all this kind of guff, and yet here they are expanding it. But spoiler alert, by the way, they won't expand because it won't happen.
The really interesting thing, we look at the polls and talk to our readers, and people don't. It's not the end goal that they necessarily mind. It's not the idea that we should leave the planet in a better place than we inherited. Absolutely, and if you make it cleaner and nicer to live here. Albeit, maybe when people will one day want to buy an electric car, maybe one day when there is an alternative for gas boilers that is affordable and effective, then they will voluntarily sign up. We all recycle, people. It's not, it's not the end of the world, is it? I mean, there's some people argue it is. However, it's the unrealistic costs of it, and it's the fact that it's always once again put on consumers to pick up the rap. And then they look at across China opening new coal-fired power stations. They look at Donald Trump, go, you know what? These electric car manufacturing mandates. They're clearly nonsense. The manufacturers know they're nonsense. Consumers know they're nonsense, and it's the irritation at being made to do something that's clearly, is unrealistic, and everyone's sort of going on it. And if you question it, you're suddenly Satan. And you just think the zeal at which people like Ed Miliband go at this, that we're almost cutting off our noses to spite our faces in the fact that we've got this great, still got these great reserves of oil and gas in the North Sea, and energy independence is going to be such a big issue in the next 20 years, and as the world gets madder and madder, and it's like we are sort of almost punishing ourselves out of pure politics rather than actually being pragmatic and realistic about the way the world is. And I think that's what annoys people.
The other issue we've got running this afternoon.
I had a bit of a rant there.
No, I like it. It's good. We are all for the rant, Harry, here on the programme. The other question we're throwing out, in addition to Millie Watch, is runway watch. How long does it take to build a runway?
2040, they're saying now.
I mean, come on. I mean, it goes back, sadly, as I said to Kevin Schofield a second ago. We made this very point. Indeed. You know that thing that when blokes talk, everything leads back to the Romans. You know, and the Romans,
all roads lead to
the
Rome,
people of straight roads.
Yeah.
I mean, a runway of all things that wouldn't take much imagination. You might think a flipping runway, Harry, is up there, isn't it?
The funniest thing, I think, I looked like a mad person. I was just laughing to myself on the train when I was reading this earlier. They're going to have to knock down BA's headquarters to build this runway. Is that right? There's this ginormous sort of glass palace on the side of Heathrow, which is the global headquarters of BA, which is right where they're going to build it. So they're going to have to knock that down now. And you just think all these little things. Obviously, you got look. The fight hasn't. Rachel Reeves has not won the argument on growth today. She's started the argument on planning and growth. She's now got to get it through all of those new Labour MPs who, suddenly they've been elected, but they haven't really been tested on anything, and they've got smaller majorities. A lot of them. It's a very big but very thin, majority in Parliament. There's a lot of people that will start to worry when they start to get their constituents in the neck, saying, "What on earth are you doing?" You've got the Mayor of London already out saying he's not convinced about Heathrow. And, the fight begins now.
Sure.
It's all very well saying, yes, the Treasury is backing it. Yeah. Great. Wait till they see people lying in front of bulldozers and the like. And that's even before the bulldozers, and before the bulldozers even get there, we'll have years of judicial review. And as happens before. This is why, if it was easy, the last government would have done it, and if it was really easy, the government before that would have done it.
But I think they can bring their own MPs. I mean, they did it with winter fuel allowance. All those new MPs that had those, were holding those banners saying we won't cut winter fuel allowance.
The closer you get to an election, though, and the Treasury and Rachel Reeves are about to ask the Labour Party to swallow an awful lot in the coming months. Spending cuts, she has not got any minute. She would not be doing this speech if it was all going brilliantly. They haven't got any money. They can't put taxes up anymore because the tax burden's already at the highest level in peacetime, or whatever it is, since the Second World War. They cannot do it. They've got to cut. They've got to cut the benefits bill. That's going to really wind up a lot of Labour MPs, and they're going to have to reduce budgets of government departments. And this is going to be painful because they're a party that have wanged on about austerity for 20 years, and you can't touch the say. Yeah. And the NHS chief executive today out there saying, look, we're probably going to need more money again. Yeah. Just more. And actually, on top of all of that, you're also asking them to concrete over half their constituencies, which they've only just won. Yeah. And so, yes, there is yes, they can force some stuff through, but there's an awful lot they're asking of their MPs. At some point, it's going to go, no,
100%.
Enough.
Darren Jones might get that job before we even know it.
He didn't say he didn't want it. He just said he wasn't going to get it anytime soon.
You've got a taster with Harry talking to Darren Jones, Chief Secretary to the Treasury. You can watch the full episode of that. It's on the talkTV YouTube channel. Never mind the ballots. It's always a cracking show. Great analysis and just I would say how politics should be done.
Oh, you're very kind.
Well, there's a lot of old nonsense out there, frankly, in the world of politics.
Also, you don't necessarily have to scream at. You'll know this. You don't have to scream at someone to get, to get A, good TV, and B, good answers, and actually a little bit more rope, should we say, and who knows what happens.
It's there now. Harry Cole is, of course, The Sun's political editor. Thank you to him. Coming up on 10 to 3, this is Talk.
1997, the average house price compared to your salary was 3.4.
Yeah.
Now in 2023, it's 8 times. So younger people now are delaying or cannot afford to actually buy a house. So if they're not having a house when they're younger, they might move in together a bit later, which means they don't have time to have those 2.1 children.
Yeah.
And the reason house prices has gone up so much in the last like 25, 30 years is because of the mass immigration that we've had in the past.
We have more people and pretty much the same amount of housing. We've not built anything like the same amount of housing we need.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
All right, it's 10 to 3. Just before we go back to the calls, Pav with you in a second. Voice of Doom is back. It's a brand new Voice of Doom. Yesterday, after 14 long days, the mystery voice, the political mystery voice, that's the kind of nuance of this, was won. And I've forgotten who it was now. What was her name? Louise Casey, isn't it? Louise Casey was the right answer, which means we've got a new voice today. Remember, don't phone in because there isn't a prize. You can message in if you want to join in with. That's fine. Here's the new voice.
That's the decision they've taken.
Oh, hang on. I know that voice. I know it from somewhere. Here it is again.
That's the decision they've taken.
So don't phone, but you can message 87222 if you want to have a go. We'll tell you the answer on the other side of the news if we get a correct answer. If not, it rolls over to tomorrow. I think this one will go. Here it is.
That's the decision they've taken.
Who's that then? If you think you know, drop us a message. Back to your calls. Pav is in Harrow on Rachel Reeves. Pav, what have you got for us? Afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. To be honest, Harry stole a lot of my thunder. If I'm being perfectly honest with you, that's why he's so good.
It's annoying when that happens, isn't it?
It is, but I'm not planning on applying for a job to the Sunday.
Okay, all right.
I'm not quite qualified. But anyway, let's start. So, look, this is part of the problem in that these guys have spent so long in opposition, and I call them, they've got very much an opposition mentality.
Yeah.
You look at what they were suggesting, and I used to have a laugh. I said, look, when Labour gets into power, everybody's going to be a millionaire, everybody's going to live forever, everything's going to be solved, no potholes, etc. Because that's what they were doing. But it's obviously when reality is met. But briefly on what she said, and I'll get on to the broader point that I've got in a second, I don't really see anything new in that, in her sort of her trident of opportunity, as she's put it, or as I put it, sorry. Reservoirs, well, they were already underway. The runway, don't forget, was approved in June 2018 when you had all the nonsense with Johnson going off to Afghanistan despite saying his opposition. And what's the reason it's taken 6 years, as some of your guests have alluded to, is because of the legal challenges.
Yeah.
So it to me, it's a little bit rich for Labour to claim that they are the ones that have overridden it, because a lot of them were part behind the challenges that were taking place. Your listeners may recall when the Court of Appeal said, "Oh, this is not in accordance with the Paris, agreement."
Yeah, 100%.
So again, I find that a little bit hypothetical, but of course, when we can't use the internet, and things like this are always scrubbed, of course, because we have such short memories.
Yep.
You then move on to the Oxford-Cambridge stuff. Again, this has been mooted for decades, right? And some of it is underway. There's the disparity as to exactly what percentage has been completed. But the point that somebody alluded to earlier was to me, the salient one. Put, and I'll get on to Oxford shortly, put into perspective the Bedford-Cambridge line, and anybody who's dealt with Bedford or Coventry City Council will know what exactly I'm about to say, is that in itself will probably take about 3 lifetimes, excuse the exaggeration, hyperbole, because they are very set in their ways. I'll leave it at that. I don't want to make too much comment on those. And so, if you turn around and then put that into perspective, the point that you alluded to earlier was that 10 years, 15 years probably is being optimistic in terms of getting that completed. Add in the fact, Ian, that the cost of living and indeed the cost within Oxford as a city, are so goddamn expensive now. There's various facts and figures available, but they just are. And then you have to ask yourself, well, it's all well and good predicating that you're going to make Oxford and Cambridge, the Silicon Valley, but they've got to actually be habitable. They've got to actually be able to, for normal people to be able to reside there. That clearly isn't the case, hasn't been the case for a long, long time.
100%.
No doubt university students will tell you, and house owners. And this is therefore the problem. They are essentially selling us a complete pup in this regard, because they are making promises. And I'm going to be a little bit cynical. I think they are well aware they are not going to win the 2029 election if it takes that long. At best, I think they may be the largest party if the centre-right split the vote, but there you go. So in all fairness to them, they are playing a little bit pragmatic politics here, because they can make these promises full well knowing that none of them are really going to see the light of day in terms of the current parliamentary term. So what's the accountability? And briefly, just on that note, the problem that you have is that it's all well and good making these promises to the unions and everything else in terms of what they said, but there's a problem I always outline, Ian. I still think that for a lot of people here, we deal with a very 1960s infrastructure mentality. And when people ask me to justify that, I tell them, I say, look, if you look at the number of houses, the largest number of houses built by any government in recent history was 1968. Thereafter, numbers have always been dwindling for all sorts of reasons. So until we change that mentality, and we've had the sort of, the anti-planning pygmies, we've got the green pygmies now, which as soon as you breathe think that, you're affecting the climate and the planet and everything else under the sun, then unfortunately, until that's changed, you're going to have these problems continue to manifest. Neither of these parties seem to have either the stomach or the ability to be able to change that. And unfortunately, that will always impede any progress that the country so desperately needs.
Yeah, spot on. Pav, as ever, great call. Thank you. Pav in Harrow. Some more comment from you as we move towards the news. Robert Taylor says the runway at Port Stanley on the Falkland Islands took 6 to 8 weeks to build. Now, maybe there's different considerations, planning and stuff like that. I'm guessing, I don't know. But it does seem ludicrous that we're talking in decades to get it all through the various potentially, at 15 years, 20 years. Why would... naivety on my part, I get it. I don't know how that stuff works, and neither do most people. You'd still think, in certain parts of the world, we know that China, I know we're not China, and there's lots of good reasons, thankfully, why we're not China. But even in America, you get that sort of sense, we'll get this stuff done. We'll make stuff happen. The whole turning around an oil tanker mentality of government, where it takes forever just to get the simplest of policy in place, to change conventional thinking, to somehow penetrate the zeitgeist, to eradicate groupthink, all of this kind of crazy stuff that happens, particularly in the public sector. The United States are dining out right now. It's ripe old days over there in the good old USA. Partly for that reason, it's just get stuff done if you want to get it done. Chris says, don't worry, they will scrap the TV licence. However, they will bring in a digital communication licence on all internet and mobile phone connections. Yeah, you see, that's the next thing. They're not going to lose all of that money and not... It's a bit like the road tax disappearing for electric cars, isn't it? Voice of Doom. Will we get a right answer on the other side of the news? This is The Voice.
That's the decision they've taken.
If you think you know who that is, 87222. Hopefully we'll get a winner. We'll let you know in a few moments' time. Right now, coming up on 3 o'clock here on Talk, let's get the latest news headline.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Yeah, good afternoon. 3 minutes after 3 o'clock right here at the home of common sense. This is Talk. Coming up this section, we're taking responses to Rachel Reeves' big speech this morning. By the way, refusing to rule out further tax rises in the spring, but also confirming the government's support for Heathrow's third runway to boost Britain's economy. And I think we can pretty much all be in agreement. This thing ain't gonna, if it was going to be built, it's not going to happen in her political lifetime. That's how bad the situation is, but she's setting the scene. Growth is the new buzzword over there at Labour HQ. Meanwhile, elsewhere, big headache for the Labour Party. The NHS is run by bureaucrats who lack ideas and are obstructing the reforms needed to fix it. This is a report by MPs. What do we say to that? We'll talk to one former paediatrician on that very point in just a second. And households that can only watch streaming services like Prime and Netflix and Disney and the like could be forced to still pay the TV licence. You can't make this stuff up. What is going on? Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. Great comments coming in from you. Perry says, Ricochet Rachel. I nearly fell off my chair. I don't know why I called her Ricochet Rachel. It just sounds about right for some reason. Great one from Paul, who says as well that it took about 12 years to build Stansted Airport and a further 10 years plus to get it up to capacity that it is now without having to demolish homes and rehouse people, never mind compensation for businesses. Reeves and co will be long gone by then. I think you're actually right. Cooperman says, but what actual specific thing is Rachel Reeves going to do? I don't want the we're going to cut the red tape. I know exactly what regulations they are going. I want to know exactly what regulations they're going to ditch. And I think, as Harry Cole said in the last hour, that speech from Rachel Reeves was very much about almost a necessity. There was a real sense, and rightly so, in government that they lost the grip, if they have ever had it in the first place. 6 months plus in office, the news wasn't great. They were being accused of delivering a budget that was up there with the Liz Truss omni-shambles budget. And they needed a boost, a big old boost, and this was their way of doing it. I'm not sure they absolutely achieved that. I don't think they did. And also the voice of doom as well. Before the news, of course, it was a brand new voice of doom. This is the voice we played you.
That's the decision they've taken.
Who is that? Lots of comments and guesses here. Was it John Swinney? No. Gordon Brown? No. Douglas Alexander? No. Nicola Sturgeon? Definitely not. Stephen Flynn, Michael Howard? Both no's. Ian Blackford? No. Kevin Schofield? It was not. Hamza Yousaf? It wasn't. And Jim Fitzpatrick? A big fat no. However, Christian St Albans was the first to get it correct. As was John, on the Isle of where? It says the Isle of Col. Is that a place, the Isle of Col, that I don't know about? Is that the place where Collins live? I don't know. It was Pat McFadden, right-hand man to Keir Starmer. Pat McFadden is the answer. Well done if you got it right. We'll have a brand new voice. It means we've got to do extra work tomorrow right here on Talk. Now, a damning report by MPs warns that NHS bureaucrats lack ideas and are obstructing necessary reforms. This is the Public Accounts Committee, usually much respected, says officials are hindering improvements despite the government's ambitions to overhaul the system. It comes as a damning photo, shows the grim reality of the NHS crisis. It's an image of elderly patients lying on trolleys in a hospital corridor as they wait for care. Let's speak with Tony O'Sullivan, co-chair of Keep Our NHS Public, also a retired NHS consultant paediatrician. Tony, good afternoon to you, sir.
Hello, Ian. Hi.
Do you not feel rather glad you're retired now with all of this going on?
Well, I felt relieved to be retired throughout the pandemic, where I saw amazing colleagues suffering at the front line and giving their lives for the NHS. But it's certainly a terrible crisis, very, very serious. And, Yes, I am, but I'm here as part of Keep Our Anxious Public, trying to maintain the call for the NHS to be supported.
And it appears, well, according to this report from MPs, that one of the problems they're up against is that people come up with a lot of ideas, but they're met with this sort of impervious wall where you can't break through. People are not susceptible to change, I suppose, is one way to put it. What is your response to that?
Well, in a way, I'm not here to defend the Department of Health or NHS officials, but I would say that I was at my local health board for the Integrated Care Board in my part of the world last week, because it was their public consultation on the government's very proposals that we're talking about here. And in their own introduction, they warned us that the Integrated Care Boards around the country are facing an £8 billion deficit this year. And they are warning that they are facing cuts in services rather than repairing what's going on. They were warning that, and they were saying that they face about 1,000 job losses within the Integrated Care Board part of the NHS. And they were talking about the 14,000 avoidable deaths in the last year because of delays in the urgent care pathway. Yeah. And I would add, 107,000 vacancies, 32,000 vacant nursing posts, huge numbers of unemployed doctors, even though we desperately need more GPs and we desperately need more anaesthetists, and the large numbers of community nurses that are needed. But the workforce planning in the last decade has completely failed to produce them, so that they're just not available. And of course, there are separate crises across the system: maternity care, mental health, and dentistry. So, as an ex-paediatrician, I feel that the NHS is really suffering and needs political support from the government and funding.
One might think, understandably, that this is a Labour government, that they would be, they will always argue. I mean, there's a little bit of a debate on, how the NHS came around and sort of multi-party support mostly back then in the 40s. But, they would say, look, we are the party of the NHS. Wes Streeting is a man very passionate. He's had to, as I'm sure you're aware, previously use the NHS for very serious procedure recently as well. So, it's in their DNA to support this stuff. They want it to succeed. But many clinicians and people like yourself are clearly not seeing enough evidence that the changes required are about to happen.
Well, no, you're right to point that contradiction out. I mean, I would say as an ex-paediatrician, but also even as a human being, the fact that there's the equivalent of 40 jumbo jets crashing and killing 14,000 people in a year, that for me is an emergency, and that should be the immediate focus of the government. Now, in some ways I don't disagree with the three tranches of their plan to have better community-based care, to reduce the illness in the first place, and indeed IT transformation. But if a building is burning down, you don't decide, let's restructure the staff and install new equipment. You actually deal with the fire, and the fire that I'm talking about is the desperate frontline shortage of funding, shortage of staff, not enough beds, the crisis in social care, hospital ceilings falling down, operating theatres closed because of that, loss of capacity, and the government's decision to spend £2.5 billion in extending the private sector's capacity to deal with NHS patients for elective waits is missing the real crisis of people dying immediately here and now from delays in ambulance care, delays in transfer to hospital, delays, into the A&E, delays in getting a hospital bed, and then huge pressures on social care, which means that people that need to be looked after properly with dignity in the community are still staying in hospital.
How are other countries doing it better, or why are they doing it? Similar-sized economies, you look at France or Germany, Spain perhaps, who And I don't mean this as a point about, keep our NHS public or whatever. They are all services, which, as you'll be more aware than me, that are free from cradle to grave. They have slightly different ways of doing insurance-based policies, ownership of hospitals in the private sector in Germany and things like that. But it's broad, it's free, basically. Better outcomes. What are they doing that we're not doing? And shouldn't we just say, well, let's do that?
Well, the standard of care, for example, in France, I think at the moment is very good. But if we just cast our minds back a few years to 2010, that was a period where the NHS had been funded to catch up almost to the equivalent of France and Germany in terms of capital, in terms of spending per person. And at that point, and right up to 2015, when, after 5 years of austerity, the wheels were beginning to come off. But for all that period, the NHS was judged to be the best overall universally accessible, comprehensive health service for a major country in the world. For the 11 nations that this periodic review was from the Commonwealth Fund in America. And I think we need to know that when the NHS is funded to successfully deliver for the patients and for the population, it is actually more cost effective than France and Germany. But moving on 14 years now, organisations that we respect, like the Health Foundation, the King's Fund, Nuffield Trust, they would estimate that in terms of per capita comparison, France spends...
And it appears Tony's line has frozen on that very point. We'll try and get Tony back. If we can do that in the next few moments, we'll continue just on that point about France and what they spend in comparison to our country, because that was sort of central to what we were trying to get across there. We've got Tony back with us. Tony, you were mid-flow when the line froze there. You were making the point about how much France spend.
All right, and sorry about that.
Not at all.
I'm not asking for the £40 billion shortfall that France gets over Britain or 70 billion of Germany, but I do feel that lack of investment over the years is the reason why our hospitals are crumbling, and we don't have enough scanners, we don't have enough MRI scanners, we don't have enough CT scanners. The 107,000 vacancies. Part of that vacancy factor is that trusts are being told to hold back on spending in order to try to bridge this £8 billion gap within year. And although the government invested 25 billion at the last autumn statement on the 30th of October, that really was only allowing the NHS to tread water, given the huge amount of underfunding and undersupport that had gone on previously. So although it sounds like a lot of money, caught up with the deficit compared to other comparable nations, I think it's the Health Foundation argues that to actually start rebuilding the NHS, we need about £38 billion a year for the next 5 years. But I would also say that every pound of public money that's invested in healthcare at the moment should be invested in rebuilding the NHS back to capacity. And where the NHS has been funded to succeed, it has not relied on the private sector. It has delivered amongst the best health outcomes in the world.
Somebody here just sent us this message, Tony. Says, regarding the NHS, according to NHS Digital, there are more doctors and nurses now than before Brexit. With more funding, it's the world's 7th biggest employer in a country, only 21st largest in size. How much more cash and staff do these people propose the NHS needs?
Well, I would say that we simply cannot afford not to have a functioning NHS. We've got nearly 3 million people out of work for health-related reasons, and that's gone up nearly 1 million since the COVID pandemic. It's all very well to say that the NHS has more money than it needs. It simply does not. And anybody that thinks that it's slacking staff that is the reason for 14,000 people dying a year, or for the waiting list being 7.5 million. They are really being disingenuous, and they are not being fair to the NHS. They're not being fair to its staff, and they're not being fair to the patients who need a functioning, excellent NHS again. So I think that when the NHS has been funded so that it can function very well and have minimal waiting lists, as was the case in 2010, then in comparison with other major economies, we get value for money. We get the best value for money. And that is why we feel you cannot afford not to invest in the NHS. And that, for me, is part of the country, its economic recovery, as well as perhaps its moral recovery.
OK, Tony, it's very thorough stuff. We will speak again, I'm sure. Thank you, Tony O'Sullivan. He's the co-chair of Keep Our NHS Public, also former NHS consultant, paediatrician. Thank you to him. I mean, it is, from his words there, it's more money. Yes, it is a change of how things are done, but ultimately we don't put enough money in there. And I don't know, other than asking, for a percentage increase on income. I don't know how much income tax you can ask people to pay, for goodness sake, and national insurance contract. I mean, goodness, it's off the scale. It's off the scale. We're in that sort of place where, many people paying, ludicrous amounts of cash. There is something about, look after yourself. I mean, I've never felt that message more clearly than in recent years, of keeping a check on your own health, because you don't want to be walking the corridors of the NHS if you end up in a department that is, got big old waiting lists. I know it's a dual thing. Some people have got great stories about the NHS, and you went to A&E, seen within 90 minutes, everything was tickety-boo, or you had an operation, in, out, great care. When it works best, we all remember that. But that isn't the equation. It's not the anecdotal evidence that is, it's compelling and it's worth bearing in mind. It's the overarching monolithic nature of the NHS and all of the shortcomings that go with that. And they are clearly many of them. I don't know the full answer. I mean, how much money do you throw at it? You could never really throw enough, could you? You could keep on going, well, we need more. We still need more. We need more scanning machines. But people aren't getting healthier. They're getting sicker as well. There's mental health to throw in there too. 0344 499 1000. We'll take some comments on that as well. Back to you on the phones. Oh, the Isle of Coll, by the way, it's one of the Inner Hebrides islands off the west coast of Scotland, of course. I didn't know that, the Isle of Coll. That's a good little factoid for us all to take away. I just thought it was half a word that wasn't complete. We established the facts, as we do. Everything you need to know and all the breaking news right here on Talk. Back to your calls in a couple of moments. It's 3:20.
going back to trade again, we have a roadmap. We know exactly what needs to be done. The short term, the wins are short term. We can deliver growth quickly, but we've got to get on with it, and we've got to take action straight away, and we've got to respond to the challenge to go further faster. I fully agree with that.
Well, yeah, but that's all just gobbledygook, isn't it? I mean, you're talking in kind of riddles. You're saying go further, go faster, employ more people, stimulate the economy, get involved in trade. Who's going to do that when they've got less money than they had last year?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This from Graham. NHS spending argument is based on per capita is valid, so more evidence to keep immigration under control. Good point. Dean says maybe the NHS should get rid of poor managers and employ medical professionals to allocate the massive annual budget. I think there's a lot of medical professionals that would quite like to see fewer managers, although every time I raise that issue, somebody says, yeah, that's a good point. However, there's not enough managers. Sounds like there's enough of them. Some you've got to keep. You've got to have other people sort of admin and all the rest of it. But it would make little difference if you started to get rid of a few of them. Probably make some difference, though. Another one here. We don't have enough medical scanning equipment because those controlling the money have spent our money creating more levels of useless and incomplete. And that's where the message ends. 24 minutes after 3. Matthew's in Cranbrook. On that issue of the runway, Matthew, what have you got for us? Hi.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Ian. Well, I've always got you on the TV on the office normally, but I'm at home actually ill.
Day off?
Yeah, I know, day off, ill, but I'll come back to that.
Okay.
But, we definitely don't need we don't need another runway.
Yep.
We can't afford it. Last time I looked to go on holiday, you could book a ticket and you could get a flight out. You didn't have to wait. Unlike the NHS where you have got to wait, so the money would definitely be better spent there. We just don't need it. I mean, I'm actually off today because I've done a hernia, believe it or not.
Okay.
And the NHS have told me anywhere between 18 weeks and 52 weeks.
What?
Wait. And
so a year wait, potentially.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. So I've then acquired into a private, and I'm actually going in tomorrow to see a surgeon that's costing me, well, it will cost me the whole job, will be £5,700. But I need it done because I need to get back to work because I'm a working.
So that's the consultation and getting it done?
Yes. And I haven't even got an appointment to see a specialist yet.
Yeah.
That's just a letter to say you're in the system. But
yeah, because that could be another few months on top of the...
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I mean, that just says the figure. It just says them numbers on your, letter that you...
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, no, my other half's been through something similar and it's gone on forever. You know?
Yeah, I mean, but I'm actually going tomorrow privately, but like I said, but that's a different issue. But
funny how often we hear that now. We never heard that a few years ago. It's very weird if somebody said I had it done privately. I was talking to a mate of mine a couple of weeks ago, last Friday. Went out for a drink. He's got a damaged shoulder. It's a nerve thing. Same as you. He's going to get it dealt with privately because he's in too much pain and he can't hang around.
Yeah, and it goes back to immigration and everything else, doesn't it? Because there's just too many people.
Yeah.
And that third, I think Labour are using this runway as a smokescreen to. I mean, it's working. It's getting us talking about other things, other than the problems that they can't sort out. But obviously, we do need to talk about them because it's a sensible conversation to have.
Yep.
But I mean.
So a bit of distraction on their part.
Yeah, I mean, if you was going to build a third runway, surely you'd build another Dartford crossing, wouldn't you? First.
Yeah.
The waiting lists on, the waiting times on the Dartford crossing is unbelievable.
Yeah, what happened? I mean, that was meant to be freed up, wasn't it? The minute they got rid of those barriers and, the bit they built the bridge because that was meant 4 tunnels going, all that business. And, my other half used it on Monday, actually. She was there for about an hour and a half trying to get on what is, on a good day, a 20-minute journey.
Yeah, exactly. so wrong. And the France own that anyway, don't they? We sold it to France.
I think they do. Yeah. It's not us anyway.
It's actually madness. But
it certainly is. I hope you get better, Matthew. You're not off for work for too long as well. Thank you, Matthew in Cranbrook. Comment here from Mary, who says, why don't the government offer free university places to English students that want to study a subject that can help the NHS? Doctors, nurses, paramedics, physio, etc. And whatever length, of course, they are on, they have to agree to do that many years in the NHS before they even think about going private, like a lot of doctors do. I've always thought that was a kind of an interesting area. I don't know whether it's, well, what is happening in terms of shortage, but even if you did that tomorrow, what's it going to take, 5 years to train up all of those people? There's probably and arguably a better way of getting nurses in as they used to back in the day, so you don't have to go to university. You can train while you're on the job. I'm sure the requirements of medicine today are different from the 1970s or 80s or even the 90s for that matter, so I can understand you might need to be, I don't want to say more qualified, a different kind of qualified than you would have been back in the day. But do it on the job. That's surely the answer to that one. On the BBC, Patrick says, why can't the BBC just show adverts? Surely that is the way to go to get rid of the TV licence. And, of course, being the BBC, we would get a much better class of advert as well. You would. One of the arguments about it's interesting, isn't it? I don't have any sympathy for the BBC on this, by the way, but one of the problems, so the BBC is almost like a news monopoly in some respects. I mentioned earlier, if you want to be a small radio station or a local newspaper, to try and get, and even in the national world, there is a factor here. The BBC are so well resourced financially and otherwise that they kind of hoover it all up. You wouldn't be able to beat the competition of, if you go to have you ever been to a local news website? I mean, if you can get through the amount of pop-ups and ads and strange scrolls that they do in order to advertise, I mean, it's lunacy. There's often a little letterbox of a window that you can read a sentence through, because every time you scroll, an ad for the local carpet company pops down, and then another one pops up for pizzas. It's madness, and the reason for that is because they haven't got the resources that you would have if you're at a BBC website. Tens of millions of pounds are spent on it. How do you go up against that? So that creates an unfair competition. The downside is that if the BBC became commercial, there is a similar issue that the BBC could, on certain programmes, certain areas, because they've been so well resourced over the years. So whether it's radio, whether it's, Strictly Come Dancing, the big shows, would hoover up all the ad spend and leave other organisations wanting. So there's a lot of people in the commercial world that don't like the BBC licence fee, obviously, but simultaneously they understand that it keeps a bit of competition away when it comes to ad revenue. This is Dave in South Wales on the runway. Dave, what do we do? Afternoon to you.
Well, it's not going to happen, is it?
No,
I mean, the thing
doesn't look like it.
Because it's not a plan for... Well, what troubles me is that it's being touted as a plan for the future when it patently isn't. The thing is, if you're going to have more airspace, more aeroplanes, you need them on the coast, whether it's in Norfolk, South Coast, Devon, Cornwall, West Wales, Scotland. You need them there. That'll stop overflying as well, but you do need road and rail, electric road and rail links between them. But that is a plan for the future. Having another runway in London doesn't even think about it. I mean, think of the traffic that's going to generate around there. I mean, I understand it's difficult enough travelling around that area now.
If you start stuffing stuff near a capital, any capital city is always going to be busy, right? You're in South Wales, so Cardiff and Swansea are the busier areas of that area. Yeah. So of course they are. They always will. So to add to it creates another problem, right?
Yeah, that's right. And the thing is, they're not creating. They are creating problems, not solving them, which is not what they're there for. I mean, the thing is that we should be able to look at the future and plan. I mean, transport system has evolved. There's nothing planned about it.
Yeah.
I mean, our roads are too narrow for the width of cars we've got. Roads were designed for horse carts and 4/8 at the most modern. You know, it is time somebody took it in hand and looked at what do we actually want Britain to look like in the future?
Yeah, it's a fair point and a great question. Dave, thank you. But somebody should have been thinking that 20 years ago, of course, and 30 years ago. Certainly with energy, it's criminal that we just allowed all that to happen, didn't invest in any... nuclear could have been default. We could have been completely energy independent if, you know, David Cameron, it seems like half an hour ago that David Cameron was in power. It was 15 years ago when he began. If he'd have done it on year one, we'd be sitting here now. We wouldn't be looking elsewhere to fuel and energise the country. It would all be nicely in place. 0344 499 1000. And thank you to Sandra, who says, great to see the consultant paediatrician with you. I worked in southeast London in a PCT where he chaired some of the meetings that I was minuting. Great to see. He's still working on a good cause, says Sandra. Happy to have reunited you, Sandra, in a curious kind of way, if that makes sense. More comments coming in from you, more on the way. We'll also talk what it's costing the police to pay to kennel XL bullies that have been confiscated as part of the new initiative. Details of that coming next on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
As we speak, by the way, US Health Secretary nominee Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is being grilled. It's that confirmation hearing. I don't know what happens to those, and forgive me for not having that bit of extra info. At the end of the session, do they say, yeah, OK, we really like you, but... and Trump goes, well, it's nothing to do with you anyway, because we're having him. I think they can scupper things. At the moment, he's being questioned, certainly on vaccine hesitancy. Is that the right way to put it? Of which he's been very, very vocal. I'm not just talking about COVID, but MMR and also other vaccines over the years as well. How does that bode? For some Americans, just fine, thank you. For others, it takes the country back decades if you're going to get rid of stuff that has demonstrably saved people's lives over the years. And I'm not including COVID in that. I'm talking about all the other stuff. But, you know, people have their own arguments as to whether you needed a COVID vaccine in the first place. Some did, maybe. many didn't, and that I think is central to his point. 0344 499 1000. 20 just gone, 25 to 4. Let's have a look at that story then of police forces losing £25 million annually. This is to cover kennel costs and veterinary bills for those XL bullies that they've had to seize under the government initiatives. Figures show that 4,586 dogs were seized in the first 6 months of the ban under the Dangerous Dogs Act. Each dog costs around about £1,000 a month to kennel, with delays pushing costs to £18,000 before euthanasia. So, I mean, these are dogs that are just kept there and then they're killed. Let's speak with Mike Neville, retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector. Afternoon to you, Mike.
Good afternoon, Ian. When you think that £25 million, how many police officers that could fund, it's an absolute scandal, isn't it? That I think what happens here is too often the people in Parliament, they set laws. They brought in the Dangerous Dogs Act in 1991, very quickly, very poor piece of legislation. And they bring these things in and then they expect the police just to clear up the mess.
That's exactly what's happened, isn't it? You know, nobody ever said when they were working this out and trying to get a response on the dangerous dogs issue, well, actually, there's going to be a cost implication to this. We've got to staff it, we've got to build staff, we've got to look after them, there's vets bills, there's all sorts of other things. I mean, you might have thought that would have been top of the list on the agenda that day.
I would have thought so. But what struck me, though, they're claiming that it costs £1,000 a month.
Yeah.
To look after one of these dogs. I mean,
where are they? In the Savoy?
Ritz. Certainly Travelodge or the Premier Inn or something like that.
Yeah.
It seems an enormous amount of money to pay. But in whatever's happening, just looking after the things takes away resources. And I can't see why, when these dogs are seized, you know, it's an offence now to have one of these without a certificate. So, and there's very few of those certificates been issued. And there's all sorts of massive restrictions. You know, you've got to be over 16, you've got to have a lead, you've got to have a muzzle, you can't breed it, you can't give it away, you can't sell it. There's so many restrictions. I think people are giving up on this. And I can't see why these creatures, because they're very dangerous creatures, should not be put down straight away. Why they're being kept for months and months, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, clearly it isn't about to change any time soon, Mike, by the looks of things. I mean, you know, the government are trying to work out how to build a runway, for God's sake. I don't imagine they're going to stop and Rachel Reeves is going to start getting all animated about an XL bully.
Well, you would think the police would be you know, really looking at how they can make these things quicker. I mean, what struck me is the sadness of this is that I was reading in the Police Scotland, there was a poor police dog, you know, one of those brave hounds that helps and protects us and catches burglars, had a broken pelvis, and because it was going to cost a few £1,000s to treat the poor creature, they put it down after all the training. So. Wow. It sort of sums up the country, that the goodies get the bad thing and the baddies get all the good stuff. It's just, that to me sums up Britain.
Indeed it does. On that point, Mike, thank you as ever. Mike Neville, he is retired Scotland Yard Detective Chief Inspector, knows what it looks like around the world of policing. And there it is, 25 million quid to house a load of killer dogs. It's not pleasant that dogs have to be euthanised. It's an awful situation, and you just blame half-wits, really, who thought they would make a good pet. Something that, just by definition of its size and strength and possible temperament, because, you know, I know people have only owned these kind of what are called dangerous dogs all their lives and said never turn, never did. Loved the kids used to rest on its back and used to take him around a room. It showed nothing but love, did our Nasher, and I'm sure it did. But you don't know if it's going to be that one moment when it gets the hump. And that's it, really, in a nutshell. There's no use people saying, well, no, but look, no, our dog is lovely. It might be, but it's about a gradient of danger, isn't it? You know, you'd have to apply that to lots of dogs as well. It's not just XL bullies. I've said it before, if I have a row with my cockapoo, it got into a punching match between the two of us, hypothetically, obviously, I'm the winner every time. I'm the winner every day of the week of that one, OK? I'm going to win that battle. I'll probably win against a Labrador as well. I might struggle against an Alsatian, but certainly if those other ones, you know, if you put an XL bully in the ring, there's only one winner if it's you and them, right? You ain't coming out of that thing. It's as simple as that. Let's go to Stuart in Reading. Back to Rachel Reeves, Runway Rach or Ricochet Rach, whatever you're thinking. Stuart, what are your thoughts?
I'm a little bit bemused by all this because I went to a consultation last week in Bletchley and Milton Keynes about the Cambridge-Oxford line and all the infrastructure they're going to put there.
Yeah.
They're going to open up the Milton Keynes-Oxford this year. The rest of the Milton Keynes to Cambridge won't be opened up till 2030.
Okay.
When all the infrastructure will be put in place. I don't know, and they've got the money, because I asked them, where are you going to get the money from? No, we've got all the money we need.
Okay.
They've already told about the housing that they're going to put there, and about all the extra commercial places they're going to build. I think she's going to build another line, and there are going to be 2 lots of railway lines with 2 towns, 2 cities and everything else there. Or she's kind of lost the plot completely now.
Yeah, I think you might be right on the second point.
But everything they're doing and everything they've said is what the Conservatives have already put in plan. They've spent a fortune on this line between Oxford and Cambridge. You want to see the glossy paper, Network Rail, all their people that turn up, little booklets, big booklets, maps and everything else. And you go, is she going to spend another lot of money? Or is it typical of this government? They've lost the plot on everything else. So what else can we do? Oh, yeah, we can say that we're now going to do this. So
that is it, though, Stuart. That I think is exactly what they are doing. They've realised that they are in a dangerous place right now, and the perception of the United Kingdom is the economy is dead. At best, it's flatlining and there's nothing happening. It's not open for business, not business friendly. And she's had to make this big speech and announce all of this in order to try and, reinvent the mood music.
Yeah, it seems to me that people have forgotten about COVID and how the government at that time laid all the money out. And they're using that. I mean, they never had a chance. 400 billion, and they couldn't put it back together. But they were doing really well. And it just seems to me that let's blame somebody and let's blame the Conservatives. I'm not too hopeful about the dictatorship with reform, because we want a democratic party, not a dictatorship.
Well, you think you see it as a dictatorship because it's like almost a one-man outfit?
But he is a dictator because he owns the shares in the company.
No, I get that. I'm not sure it makes you a dictator, though, does it?
Well, it does, because nobody else can go against him. And that's the problem. He should have opened it up and should have allowed everybody to have their say and make a proper party.
I thought that had changed, or if it hasn't, it's beginning to. But we'll have to wait and see then if we're not sure.
And I would like to have more debate on your programmes in talk about all their policies, because it seems to me they're getting such a good ride that it's almost like a party political broadcast.
Who would you like to see running the country? Which party, Stuart?
Me?
Yeah.
I don't mind, provided they know what they're doing.
Okay.
It's no good all this about making promises, we'll do this, we'll do that. Let's have a bit of honesty. They haven't got the money. If reform get in, they won't have the money.
And there lies the problem. You can look at things notionally and go, well, if we didn't have this amount of people in the country, or if we didn't spend this amount on, daft projects. But I don't know whether, even if you did all of that and you got a lot of support for it, which you would, I don't know whether that would be enough money to spend on all the other stuff that's desperately needed. Listen, Stuart, great call. Thank you for that. It's interesting how, we can all be armchair chancellors or prime ministers and work out, well, surely there's another way. There's got to be. I mean, the immigration issue is clearly out of control. I saw one commentator yesterday saying, yeah, but we've got an older population, and that older population are clearly idle, not idle as in bone idle. They literally don't go to work. At the age of 80, you tend not to. And that cohort is expanding and increasing in numbers. So you need more people. And if the people who currently live here are not having kids, which we established yesterday, then you've got to get people from somewhere else. Now, on paper, it would disappoint me if that's what we have to do. But I would go, yeah, I see what you mean. But that presupposes that all the people that come in continue to work fruitfully. And I don't mean they sponge off the state and nick a council house. That's never been my contention. But you'd have to say, well, what is even if somebody's economically neutral, that's no good either. We don't want somebody who's economically neutral, who's just ticking over, working in a non-skilled position and probably still getting tax credits because their money doesn't cover them. So they've got, if you like, casual, unskilled work. That's not going to address the issue either. Clearly, it's not going to address the issue. So I don't know which string you'd have to pull to appease that whole argument. I'm sure somebody somewhere could give you the precise details. What we do know is there just ain't the money. And the population is increasing. So we're talking about airports, we could talk about the NHS, we could talk about schools, and all of these areas are in a desperate state. I don't think we've even touched the sides on what an appalling position we're in. And I don't know how all of these, various areas, education, health, etc., play out in other countries. I always mention France, Germany, Spain, similar-sized countries are quite new to Ireland, countries that are quite near to us and similar in many respects. Ireland not in terms of population, but in terms of the kind of systems that are up and running when it comes to health and education. I don't know how they're all faring. And are they having the same argument at the moment on Paris FM about, what's on Le Talk, about what's happening to their health service? Or is this just exclusive to us, this nightmare scenario? And I'm not trying to inflame or kind of make a dramatic point for the sake of it, but the more we hear about this, that's sort of appears to be where we're at, with very little sign of it getting any better. 0344 499 1000. Back with you on the phones next on Talk.
And on the last time, because he was put into this deportation centre, a High Court judge, decides that we, the taxpayers, should give this guy, probably knowing our lot, £500,000. What the hell is going through that judge's head?
One thing that's much more expensive is how much has the British taxpayer spent on those 6 appeals? How much has this process cost us as well? And so those pensioners listening at the moment who aren't getting their winter fuel allowance, that's the kind of thing that the government is spending the money they're saving.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Steve says, I went to St Thomas's Hospital to have a hernia looked at in July 2024. Being told the next I will even get a call back regarding the meeting is March this year. In between, I went private in November, had the op within 2 months of the first meeting. God knows when I would have ever had the op on the NHS. Do you know, it's those kind of things, isn't it? It's like, you know, hernias or a kneecap problem, or you know, you've got some kind of nerve issue in your arm, as my mate has. It's all of that, which will be all regarded as mostly minor. But they're not minor when you've got them, by the way. John in Sheffield says, I work with dogs. £1,000 a month, which is the police housing cost, is about 30 odd quid a day. That's normal kennel pricing, not a rip-off. I do home boarding and charge 40 quid for a normal sized dog. That's true, but this of course isn't it's not a business, is the point, I think, with the Met Police. It's assuming the Met Police are having to house them in policing-based kennels, unless they're all going out to private tender. I don't know. One on PMQs from Paul in Fife. Watching Starmer and Badenoch is like watching Tyson and Jake Paul. Boring beyond belief. It looks stage-managed and neither lands a telling blow. Very true. On the banks closing down from the high streets, Adam says, how do you pay cash into a bank account with no high street bank? You don't use cash, right? That's it. Get rid of the folding stuff and they're home and dry. Jeremy is in Worthing. On that issue of the runway, Jeremy, what do you got for us? Hi.
Hi, and look, 80 years ago, when the country was under attack, we could build runways in about 3 weeks.
True.
Yeah, enough to take a flying fortress fully loaded. Admittedly, not quite as heavy.
Easy.
But the difference was, under pressure, no bureaucrats, we needed to survive. Now we've got an army of bureaucrats that everyone wants to put their tick in a box or cross in a box, so as they continue to get paid and try and show their worth. Reduce the bureaucracy, and for goodness sake, this has been planned for 20 years.
Yep.
Do they absolutely know anything at all from that? You can go back through the planning they knew every house that was going to be pulled down.
True.
Just the whole lot.
It's a good point. This isn't the first. It's not like today's the first time this has ever been talked about, right? I mean, this has been talked about forever.
Right. But at the top of it, you know, Rachel needs some news that people might believe. But unfortunately, if I've got millions of pounds to invest, you know, we, the uneducated, supposedly, that have something to do and have to believe everything a politician says, you know, if I've got money to invest, am I going to believe what that lot are telling me?
Yeah, and there's a big credibility problem, which was the whole point of her standing up today, to try and kind of somehow rejuvenate the perception of the party. Jeremy, great call. Thank you very much indeed. Am I going to live in Dubai with Isabel Oakeshott? Maybe that's the answer.
So not happy with my wife, you're now moving in on somebody else. How are you?
Not specifically with Isabel, I mean in the same road.
What do you do? It'd be nice, wouldn't it? The Labour Party civil war starts. Brilliant, isn't it?
We've been doing the countdown as to whether Ed Miliband's going to resign, because of course you would do.
Well, I think that if he did resign, there would be mass cheering across the whole of this country.
He's not going to resign because he likes the position.
So Starmer and she talk about growth, they want Heathrow. Miliband wasn't anywhere to be seen, which means he disagrees that he hasn't got the balls to actually do anything about it. And old Lord, is it Sir Sadiq Khan, immediately signalled he resists the plan, saying it's too noisy. The air pollution, it won't meet our climate change plans. But of course, actually what he misses, the point is that it's supposed to be growing the economy.
Yes.
None of which answers the fact that she's screwed small businesses in her budget. They are in turmoil.
And also hasn't ruled out tax rises either, so there's that little problem.
And the other thing that we found out about council tax, you know about that this week? Of course you do.
Oh, the 25%.
7 councils, 25%. I think we found a clip on another show we were doing earlier which said that he stood up in the general election campaign and said that we will never touch council tax. We won't be...
It will never, ever happen.
What?
It will never, ever happen.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1... Ooh,
it's
Happy
like
Christmas.
there's a certain time. What is that? Where does that voice? Ed Miliband's got that voice. Harold Wilson, from your teenage years, he's got that voice.
You're digging, aren't you? Because I'm 60 this year. Starmer invoking Thatcher compared his government to Margaret Thatcher's as he pledges to cut through tickets or thickets of red tape. This is from a man who spends his life setting up quangos and setting up committees to look into things.
Loves a
because he
quango.
hasn't got the ability or the intelligence to do anything about it.
When Rachel Reeves was talking about this body and that body, I thought, how many people involved in this thing?
Did you hear the best bit about Trump this week? Because there's all the stuff about Mandelson and will he be turned down. Donald Trump, whether you love him or loathe him, just said that he was going to do what he was going to do with immigration. Have you seen the footage? So he was playing golf at Doral, his club, and he was on the 6th hole, and somebody obviously rang him from the White House and said the Colombians are kicking back. By the 8th hole, he'd instigated a 25% tariff, and the Colombian president was going, oh my God, please don't do that.
Yes.
Just just get on with it. Do it.
Done.
Make a difference.
I mean,
Extraordinary.
I know I keep saying this. It's a runway. It's a straight road.
It is.
That's it.
What, life or just Heathrow? What are we talking about
Well,
here?
somebody here said it was Sean, he says, Sean in Grimsby, it would take about 6 weeks to build a runway.
Not in England, no.
And the rest of the time would be spent having meetings about meetings and diversity quotas.
3 years.
Yeah, well, it's going to take till 2030 to sort the planning permission out. 2030. They're not talking about half past 8.
Dubai, they built the Yas Marina.
Yes, that's right.
They said we'll do that in 3 years. They did it to the day. The most amazing Formula